I was wondering if Greg Schwartz is going to be with us tonight, our friend Greg, the Hollywood director. If you're in, Greg, I think you should forget the Hollywood films. I think you should forget that kind of Water of Life and the follow-up to the Water of Life whiskey films and things like that. I think that you should make a movie about the story of Masataka Taketsuru and his wife, Rita Cowan, and how he introduced whiskey to Japan. It's one of the most fascinating stories ever, not just for whiskey, but as a genuine, fun story. Have a think about that, Greg, and I'll see you all in a wee minute. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the vPub. Welcome to Thursday night again. Super excited to hang out with you for another wee Thursday night session. A little bit different, slightly off the Scotch topic for a week, and I think that's a good thing to do. I think it's a healthy thing to do, to explore other sectors, other categories in whiskey, and to catch up, especially with ones, for me, I'm speaking personally here, that I've detached myself from for a number of years. I'll explain why in a wee bit. And a bit later when we got onto the topic. But yes, tonight I've been back in that place thinking about Japanese whiskey, looking at Japanese whiskey again. I've even gone as far to buy some Japanese whiskey recently, and it's purely with the idea of having this vPub at some point to reconnect, to try and unlock Japanese whiskey once more. I discovered a gentleman recently who I knew immediately could potentially help me with that. And as I got speaking to him, it was clear that he was going to be the perfect guy to hang out with tonight and try and pull the curtain back on what's happening in Japanese whiskey as a sector and walk through the landscape bottle by bottle. There will be some uncorking and some fun tonight a wee bit later on. In the meantime, though, I'm going to jump into the lounge quickly and welcome all you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. So wonderful to see you again. I do look forward to this. I look forward to the wee orange lighting up here. If you're trying to get my attention, just type Aquaviti or at Aquaviti. And I should see it. Just make sure you're spelling it with the V, that awkward spelling that I've chosen. Molasses Mike, good to see you. And he's saying, good evening, Roy. Starting out on theme with Nikka from the barrel. Good for you, Mike. And I bet you were in a tasting recently where most of the other whiskies were watery and too delicate for your palate compared to that Nikka from the barrel. I caught your comments before we went live tonight, buddy. It's good to welcome you in. Magic is in as well, saying hello, everybody. Hello, Magic. Good to see you. Carlos Sanchez is here. Sean G, Whiskey Weekend Dram. That's Harrow Superb. Helen is here. Hellswood is here. I know you're planning a wee trip to Scotland, Helen. I'm hoping I get a chance to finally meet you and Andy when you come up here as well. Fingers crossed. Menno's Multi-Mission is in as well. And from Belgium, good to see you, buddy. I hope you're doing well. Neil Laverty's here. Good to see you, Neil. Graham Brown, fantastic, Graham. Callum is here. Tom Scaramuzza, Gary Carew, Scott Allen. How's Becky, Scott? I hope you're doing very well, my friend. Evan Calitz is in, saying hello from New Zealand. Evan Calitz. Evan, it's nice to have you here, my friend, and thank you for your support. I can see that you've already subscribed to that Aquaviti Barflies. Let me explain quickly. Lots of people have been asking me. Barflies is a YouTube membership. You just click join underneath, and for $1.99, euros, pounds, whatever your local currency is, you're able to access fun emojis like the Glencairns and the Barfly emojis, the recycled emojis, the various emojis that are to do with the channel and culture of the channel. It helps you color the live chat and the comments underneath as well. But more than anything, it's just another way to support the channel and the content. And it means that these vPubs will never, ever be monetized. That means that you don't need to sit through adverts if you're watching it live, if you're watching it on the replay, cutting up into chunks, however you want to consume the content. That's what that does. It pays for that. So Evan, welcome from all the way from New Zealand, and thanks for your support, and thanks to all the dedicated barflies who support. It's wonderful stuff. Max is in as well. Max Kreitner, good to see you, buddy. It's always great to welcome you in. And Che Francis as well, good to see you. Big Dog is here. Superb Big Dog. And Donald Rance as well over in Canada. Alistair Gray from up in Speyside. Chris Witham is here as well. Good evening, Roy. Good evening, everyone. Yamazaki 12 in the glass. Good for you, Chris. I'm going to give Chris a wee shout out here because he reached out to me recently and said, Roy, is there a club in Cambridgeshire? I'm in Cambridgeshire, and me and my buddy Black Fen, who I also know Chris on Twitter as well, we're both in Cambridgeshire and we're looking for a whiskey club. And you know what? If there isn't a whiskey club in Cambridgeshire, give us a wee shout out and see if we can't start one. So if anybody knows about a whiskey club down in that neck of the woods, maybe not in the live chat, maybe you can connect with Chris here, start something off. But if you're watching it on the replay especially, or if you leave it in the comments underneath, or reach out to me directly, whisky@aquavita.com, we can get some people connected and get some things started. I'm happy to always get involved there to try and get you guys hooking up in real life and sharing your whiskey experiences. Chris, Blackfen, good luck with it. I hope that you're able to sort something out and get some barflies connected down in Cambridgeshire. Bud Jenkins is here. Good to have you, buddy. My friend Chuck is here as well. Malt Minion, that is. I'm trying to remember where you are. I know you're in the States, buddy. It's nice to welcome you in. Good to see you. Greg's Whiskey Guide is here as well as Jim over Northern Ireland, Whiskey Novice, Christopher Malloy, Lee J. Brown, Dave Cummins, superb guys. Wonderful to see you. And so many of you, it's going to be nearly impossible to welcome you all in. Although, as that jumped there, I saw a familiar name. Did I see Ben Diedrich in here tonight? Ben, if that was your name I caught, I'm scrolling back up. I hope it was you that I saw, buddy. It'd be nice to welcome you in a wee vPub. A few people have jumped in here, joining the Barflies. Colin Rice has joined the Barflies, as well as Neil Freeman. And Michael McDonald Jr. has also bought me a wee dram. Michael, thank you so much for your recent support as well. It's wonderful to have you in. Neil and Colin, thank you very, very much. It was Colin, wasn't it? Yes, Neil and Colin, thank you all for your support. Cheers to you. Slanchan, welcome everyone. I do have a guest waiting in the background, so I don't want to kind of dilly-dally for too long. However, there's lots of buzz and excitement out there right now. And I am being a wee bit kind of deluged left, right, and in between right now, everybody talking and asking about the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. 2 weeks ago, Ralphie was here and we announced this new concept where we wanted to kind of harvest that super deep pool of knowledge and whiskey tasting experience that we have in the online community and YouTube. And it doesn't need to be restricted to that. It can extend further than that in the future, and it can certainly extend to more than the 24 founding channels that we've started with. However, lots of people are asking about how it can work, how it's going to pan out. Is it going to be like this? Is it going to be like? All I can do is ask for your patience right now. It's very, very busy behind the scenes in the background just now. We are now at the second stage, and that is refining. The 24 channels have already nominated what they want to see put forward. And now we're working as a group of 24 channels to refine that list and then release it out there as a public list that you guys will be able to interact with, nominate, vote for, and potentially have your own people's choice as well. All of that will be revealed in a couple of weeks' time when all of that has been put together. Then we can talk about the concept, what it's all about, how it's going to differ from traditional awards, why we're doing this, and just basically share a lot more information about the whole concept with you. So you only need to be patient, I think, for another 2 weeks, and we'll be able to release a lot more, lots more fun and exciting things to share with you on that. Jeff Whiskey saying, evening. Love that you got a fellow Exeter chap on this evening. Mac's channel is brilliant. I didn't know, Jeff, that he was from Exeter originally. That's fantastic. And Tim, the whiskey influencer, saying his best whiskey influencer of sabotaging Roy's live stream, Ralphie. Aye. Now, in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to get Ralphie to come. I'm going to invite Ralphie to come back on again. Ralphie does things his way to his drum, and that's absolutely fine with me. I'm going to invite him to come back on in order to announce the developments in the Online Scotch Whisky Awards, and I'm sure he'll be happy to do that. But we need to try and make sure that he doesn't sabotage the tech that he seems to be able to do from all the way over there at somewhere in the Irish Sea. I want to raise a wee glass. Firstly to my friend Alistair McPhail, who's travelling around Scotland right now. It would have been nice for me to hook up with Alistair, but he's got distractions on right now. He's got other things going on. He's celebrating his wedding anniversary this very day, and he's doing that by taking his wife to Glengoyne and Deanston, which is fantastic. I really hope that she enjoys whiskey too, Alistair. But I'll raise a wee glass to say happy anniversary, my friend, and I hope you're enjoying being back home. Nice to have you here. And another wee glass to raise. And this got me right in the feels. I think it's fantastic. Tim Medley, Donner Pass Whisky, as you know him, he's been a supporter of this channel for as long as I can remember. I think he was one of the first to come on board and support me, not just here as a commenter and a viewer, but inside Patreon as well. He's one of my longest standing supporters. A great guy, always super active in the chat and very welcoming. But it's his birthday tomorrow, and he's not going to be able to watch live tonight. So he's going to miss us tonight. But he said, Roy, for my birthday, if you're going to do anything, can I ask, would it be possible for you to give Malt Muser, Eric, a shout out and help him reach 1,000 subscribers? Now, Eric over in the States has been doing content for a while now, and we all know how important getting to that 1,000 subscribers is for a creator on YouTube. It's very, very tough. It's a hard slog to get there. And when you do get there, YouTube unlocks some nice things. So I'm going to grab Malt Muser's link right now, his channel link, and I'm going to drop it into the chat. And anybody that's watching that cares to nip along to Eric and drop a wee subscribe and have a look at his content when it suits you, and tell him happy birthday from your friend Tim. I just think that's wonderful, Tim. Superb. Yet another fantastic measure of how generous this amazing community is. Happy birthday, Tim, and good luck, Eric, Malt Muser. I hope you hit that 1,000 subscribers very soon, buddy. Cheers to you. Cheers to you both. I think most of my housekeeping is done. I'm sipping a Japanese whiskey, and I've enjoyed this much more than I expected. I think we have a problem, and we need to give most of the conversation a lot of context tonight. That I think the huge caveat that we're dealing with in Japanese whiskey right now is the cost, the price of entry that it is right now. And of course, as Scotch lovers and Scotch drinkers, we tend to hold the bottle in our hand and compare what we could have bought of our preferred choices, whether it be Scotch single malt or bourbon or whatever it is that we truly love. So we judge the whiskey by the amount it cost. And I think that's absolutely valid. We should. That's what made me disconnect from Japanese whiskey. My friend Jack, for a birthday present about 15 years ago, bought me a bottle of Yamazaki 10. Now, this was completely novel to me. I was just finding my feet in Scotch whiskey. Why would I be interested in Japanese whiskey? And it had a little plastic screw top. Most of them still do. I opened it up and I was shocked to discover that it was delicious for a 10-year-old malt whiskey. Really, really delicious. I shared it with friends. I would often pour it blind, and unanimously everybody fed back that while it wasn't maybe the most bold or maybe the most vocal whiskey, it maybe often wasn't the most interesting until they uncovered what it was, everybody agreed that it was a good whiskey. And that started me exploring Japanese whiskey, and I would always have some on the shelf. And then it was taken away from us for various reasons that we may or may not explore tonight. It's been taken away and it's been priced out of our range for the most part. And what happened in that wake, in that vacuum, is lots of dubious releases, things that were too young, non-age statements, unrecognized brands, various things dropped in that people were buying and having bad experiences with. Now, this is normal supply and demand economics, really is. We don't need to dwell too much on what's happened over the last 10 years, other than to give tonight's discussion some context. However, this whiskey that's in front of me right now, I'm enjoying very, very much. And it was £30, and it is Japanese whiskey. That in itself, and a recent discovery, not so recently, but fairly recently, has started to make me think maybe we should start to tentatively look back towards the east and see what's happening out there. Can we reconnect with it yet? And that is what my friend Mac is going to come in and help us do tonight. Jean de la Cuisine is saying, I have a grand total of 0 Japanese whiskies in my cabinet, watching this with interest and to see if anything is worth putting on the wish list. What you will discover tonight, Jean, is that all the whiskies, I'm not going to be reviewing anything tonight. I think I'm at a good place to review this one. I've taken it past the shoulder now. I've had a few drams out of it, and it's been open for 2 or 3 days. But really, it's all just exploration. It'll be uncorking these bottles tonight. So it's only kind of initial reaction and understand them. Over time, I'll be able to give it much more depth and context and drink in contrast with other things. I have to say that all of the whiskies I'll uncork tonight are north of comfortable in terms of price point. So they've got a lot of work to do from the get-go. I hope that at the very least they're still interesting, and I am going to end up taking a hit so that you potentially don't have to. And if you do, it's because I've discovered something that is actually quite worthy. Callum is saying, I do have some Nikka from the barrel. Good for you, Callum. I'm sure we'll talk about that tonight, although I won't be sipping and pouring it. David Owen is saying, isn't Nikka from the barrel basically cast strength Ben Nevis? Well, no, not entirely, but we will talk about that. In February this year, we had some changes, and Mac is very well versed in those changes from the JSLMA, and these guys have kind of got together to decide how they define Japanese whiskey going forward, which has meant they've had to declare whiskies that don't conform. It's a good step, but it's not quite as good as it could be, I think. Mac will share a wee bit more. Daniel Williams has bought me a dram. Be aware, Roy, if you tweak the bug, my wife will want to have words with you. Aye, Daniel, I am aware of this. And I think it's a good thing to say at the get-go. This is not intended for anybody to run out and buy bottles. This is intended so that we can understand the Japanese whiskey category a wee bit more, so that if we do decide that it'd be nice to have a Japanese example on the shelf, understand what's on offer a wee bit more, understand who the players are, what they've released, what's likely to be involved, how much it's going to cost us to have that bottle on the shelf, and just have a better understanding. Because right now, I think there's too many people out there that are just saying Japanese whiskey isn't even Japanese. It's all imported. We don't know what's in it. Everything is cheap. Everything, it's not even 3 years old. There's lots of this chatter going around. So I think it's worthy, if we're going to criticize, if we're going to make decisions, at least show that we've taken a bit of time. Daniel, thank you very, very much for your drama, friend. And Jimmy Legs bought me one too. Great to have you in. Why would I bother with Japanese whiskey? I wouldn't expect anything else from you, Jimmy. What was good is gone, and the rest is just questionable. I have too many other great whiskies to get to. Now, that's exactly that kind of thing. I know that the amount of Scotch to explore is already dizzying. We've got English whiskey coming at a fast rate. Wonderful stuff. Irish whiskey, a renaissance like we've never seen. Bourbons, Canadian. It's endless. As I keep saying, it's endless. However, Jimmy, if you're going to reassure yourself that you're sitting back there in the best place to enjoy whiskey, your Scotch environment, at least do it by experimenting, exploring, even if it's just a wee sample, even if it's a sample swap with somebody. Jimmy, if I discover something fantastic tonight that I think you'll enjoy, I'll send you one. Even if it's just to reassure you that you're happy where you are. How do you know you're going to be happy where you are until you try other things to contrast it and reassure that you're following the right path? Anthony Dunn is saying, being late to whiskey when I went looking for Japanese, it was crazy money. And at the point so much was sent to Japan, I found it daunting. That's exactly what I'm trying to tap into tonight, Anthony. I'll raise a glass and thank you very much for your virtual dram. Jimmy Legg, thank you too, my friend. And thanks, Daniel Williams. Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Okay, let's get right into this. I've discovered a gem in Whiskey Tube, and that gem is the channel Kanpai Planet. We will get Kanpai Planet over 1,000 subscribers. If it's not happened already, I'm going to be very surprised. Look at that. I'm going to drop in this link into the chat, and this is the link for Mac's channel tonight. I'm going to give you a little clip in a second. But this guy, I've only really connected with him this year. So he's relatively new to the scene, and bang, engaging, high energy, informed opinion, real valuable information. He's not just sitting in front of a camera and winging it. He's genuinely informed. The production value is high, and it's exactly the type of thing that gets attention, I believe, inside any scene. And I think it's an asset to have that type of content inside Whiskey Tube. I'm very, very grateful to welcome him in tonight. I'll show you this wee clip to give you a bit of a teaser. If you do decide to click that link and give Mac a sub, this is just a tiny, tiny taster of what you might get to enjoy.
This is not Japanese whiskey, and neither is this. This is, though, and so are these and these. So what the hell is Japanese whiskey? The answer to that question is more complicated and more philosophical than you might expect.
Mac, so nice to welcome you behind the bar. So nice to welcome you here on the vPub, my friend. Hello, welcome. How are you?
It's an honor to be here. Kanpai, everybody. Already seeing some of your fantastic comments in the chat, and looking forward to the next couple of hours as we explore Japanese whiskey.
Well, there's a couple of things to say right at the get-go, buddy. Number one, congratulations on breaking 1,000 subscribers. There was some chat before we went live tonight about you were creeping up 993, 995. Somebody, I think it was Molasses, clicked on, and you were, or it was Neil maybe, clicked on and you got you to 996. But now you have actually hit that key milestone, 1,000 subscribers. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And the next thing is to say thank you, because just to give it context, you're coming to us from Tokyo at 6 a.m. or just a little after 6 a.m. in the morning. Is that right?
Yeah. What is it now? 7 minutes past 6 a.m. Just so
all I can say,
yeah, not the usual time that I've got a dram in my hand, but
all I'll say is that that's just yet another measure of the dedication, buddy, that you're willing to put forward. It's amazing. I'm very glad that you're giving up a wee day to join us in the vPub. I can't have imagined a better guy to come on and walk us through the landscape than yourself, buddy. I've loved the content so far. Thank you. And here's to a little day drinking, my friend. Cheers, Mac. Nice to welcome you.
Kanpai.
Let's kick it off with how you tailed off there. I think what we're going to discover tonight, that all is not what it seems. Is that going to be the general theme? That everything is much more nuanced and complex than it actually first seems. Would that be a good summary?
I think so. I mean, I've been living in Japan for 15 years, and the more I research, the more I find out, the more value that adds to what I'm drinking, the more value that adds, as it were, to what I'm not drinking. And that's what I really want to do tonight. With you, Roy, is just explore. You know, we're here. People make up their own minds from a cost perspective, from a value perspective, from an interest perspective, whether they want to explore Japanese whiskey more. We're just here to give them that information and guide them through the things that can really add value to that whiskey journey.
Absolutely. And how we're going to do it, we've got a few bottles here. And as we uncork each bottle, rather than kind of do an appraisal and a tasting and a review, we'll use these bottles to kind of lead this through the landscape a wee bit and let us go down wee rabbit holes or diversions as we want. But let's start tonight and tell, Mac, you're from Exeter, I believe. That was Jeff Whiskey told us you're from Exeter. What brings you out to Tokyo? Who is Mac? Tell us about you.
Sure. Yeah, Jeff, apologies to disappoint you, not wearing the ECFC, Exeter City Football Club shirt, or the Exeter Chiefs rugby shirt. So I'm back in the traditional blue and in front of the background where I filmed my first two whiskey videos as well from the clip that you just showed. God,
and your pronunciation video, which was a lovely, almost beat for beat homage to my pronunciation video as well. I loved it. It was so tongue-in-cheek and so well done as well with that wee very background. Sorry to continue, please, Matt.
No, not at all. On that point, I really tried at some points to drop in your accent, but I couldn't quite do it. All I could do is just match the cadence of your delightful, eloquent tones. Anyway, so how did we get to this point? I came here for the first time to Japan on holiday for 3 weeks in 2002. And for those football fans out there, you may recall that was when the World Cup was jointly held in Japan and South Korea. And I came here, I had tickets to the first 4 England games. And because of how geographically spread apart they were, the first game just north of Tokyo, all the way up in Hokkaido, close to where Nikka's first distillery is. Yoichi down to Osaka, close to where Yamazaki is, and then across to Niigata for the round of 16 game. I just fell in love with this amazing country. And almost more than that, I fell in love with Tokyo. I've now been to 108 countries, and for me, this is just the greatest city on earth. So went back to the UK, tried to persuade my parents that I'm going to quit everything, quit my job and move here.
Wow.
Not quite the reaction that I was hoping for, given the investment that they'd put into my education and the general effort of raising me. And it was my mum that said, you know, Mac, why don't you continue what you're doing now, which was training to be an actuary within an insurance company, and then you can move out maybe with a few more opportunities. So that's what I did. I qualified in November 2005, spent 2 weeks in a drunken stupor, which is what people who qualify as actuaries tend to do.
Yes.
And then started looking for jobs, and one thing led to another. And I was out here in August 2006, and I've never looked back.
Wonderful. So what brings you then to whiskey, and specifically sharing that whiskey through a YouTube channel?
Sure. So how to start this? I lived in Edinburgh for 3 months in 2005 on secondment. It was the best summer of my life to this day. I think there's no better place on earth to be during August. Maybe the rest of the year Tokyo, but certainly August, Edinburgh is just a phenomenal place. And
Yep.
One of my things to keep me busy in the evenings was I had a spreadsheet. Being an actuary, of course, I had a spreadsheet, and I wanted to visit 100 pubs in the 3 months that I was up there, all documented. So we got to a few days to go. I had to take a couple of weeks off the drinking to actually prepare for my final, what ended up being my final exams. And some of my colleagues took me to the Scottish Malt Whisky Society. Because I had told them I'm not really a fan of the brown spirits at that time.
Yeah.
And I remember to this, I can't remember exactly what dram it was, but I had something that was described as what I now understand this. At the time I didn't. I read this thing talking about honey, and I'm like, oh, I have a sweet tooth. And then when I tasted it and it didn't taste exactly like honey, I was a little bit disappointed. I came here and started going to izakayas, which is the Japanese name for essentially the name literally means sitting drinking place, but it's essentially a restaurant. This is very much one of those cultures where food and drink go very much hand in hand. And I started drinking beer and also started drinking the infamous highballs, which are, which we're going to talk about because they're a very, very important part of the Japanese whiskey renaissance.
Yes.
And that kind of started to get me into whiskey, and then dabbling into drinking on the rocks and then neat, and seeing some of these whiskeys on the shelves and buying them, which I now really regret I didn't stock up on. The days when you could get, Ichiro's card series, people were just not interested in Karawi's hours and these kind of things.
Yes.
And then finally, it was really a bottle. I have a miniature of it here, or rather a 180 ml. This actually, it was this, the Hakushu, no age statement.
Wow.
That kind of just made me think, wow, I need to go into this much more seriously than I have. And then it's just been like this.
It does grab you. It does grab you. And it's interesting because I think we've all had the experience that we are told what we should taste in whiskey. We come to whiskey. We don't taste those things, not immediately. There's lots of barriers in the way, not least the high strength alcohol. It does take something else to happen, maybe through a mixed drink, maybe through some additional exploration and things like that. Anthony Dunn has bought me a dram. He said, watch the breakdown video and agreed Japanese whiskey standards. He's talking about your video, Mac. So informative, great introduction to a whiskey world I never knew existed. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for your kind words and your generous dram as well. So that's, you've been bitten by the whiskey bug. You find yourself, and you're also working as a bit of a guide out there. Kanpai Planet is is bigger than just whiskey. It's drinks in generally, and there's lots of other content on the channel as well about Japanese culture and Japan in general.
Sure.
But recently, this year, some of the content that you've put out, it almost breaks my heart that it's focused on such a niche, because the quality of what you're putting out, Mac, is superb. So thank you for that. Thank you for helping to raise the platform that we all enjoy being part of inside YouTube. And I hope that continues. I hope that bug, that thing that whiskey's done to you, keeps that desire going as well. Sandy McDowell's bought me a wee dram today. The closest thing to a Japanese whiskey I have is a Ben Nevis 10, which is in the glass. That's too funny, Sandy. We're going to talk about that infamous wee connection as well tonight. What have we got in the glass to start with, Mac? We've got the same dram, haven't we?
We do indeed. We have a Suntory Toki, which I think many people will be familiar with, because this is possibly the only, or one of the only, real Japanese whiskeys which you can find in a supermarket, and is pretty affordable overseas as well. And the reason for that is because it is exclusively for the overseas market. So
yes,
1 litre bottle here. I've just finished another bottle I have. This 1 litre bottle here I have is from Australian duty free. How are you finding it?
I have to say, another YouTube channel, put this forward as a whiskey I should try recently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the things that we enjoy inside the YouTube community. It's not unidirectional. It's not us broadcasting through a megaphone. So much of it is the community, whether it's a peer creator or the community, the people in the lounge, wherever it may be, feeding back to us to recommend. And when you hear it said once or twice or more, you start to take notice. So I picked this up, this blended whiskey, non-age statement Japanese blend, and I have to say it looks a lot like a lot of bad experiences I've had. This bottle does not fill me with confidence, but you can see I've taken this over the shoulder now. Mac, I am delighted with this whiskey.
Fantastic.
I think I have to frame it. It's £30. It's the least expensive whiskey we're going to drink this evening.
Yeah.
And for a blend, that smarts a little. However, this is, let me try and frame this as best I can. This is a perfect whiskey in the sense that when you drink this, there are no faults to be found here. This is clean and sweet and easy. The only way that you could criticize this, it's 43%. There's not much transparency. There's not much information on the label, and it's a blend. So you do have that grain element. There is a wee bit of confectionery sweet, light sugar and bubblegum on the finish. That it is light. It is going to be not particularly remarkable, but it's lovely. It's well balanced. It's sweet. It's very easy and approachable. And I'll go as far to say that there are malt whiskies out there from Scotland and Ireland and elsewhere that don't match up to this blend experience. So already I'm thinking, okay, I've spent £30 on a blend and I'm happy to have it in the cabinet. I'm not suggesting everybody runs out and buys this, because what you will get, if you're a malt enthusiast, you're not going to get a lot from this. But if you enjoy blends where the conversation or the company is going to be more of a priority than what's in the glass, this is almost perfect for that. It's so clean and so easy. Do you feel the same, or do you feel it's a wee bit weak or lacking in any areas?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's also a great whiskey to start with, so we can break down a little bit what's in it. You're right, not enough is disclosed, but well, so Suntory currently have 3 major distilleries, and I say major because they have a very small one called Osumi, from which they released a rice whiskey a couple of years ago. But everybody, I'm sure, who's on the chat will be familiar with the word Yamazaki. That's their first distillery, opened in 1923. There's actually not a lot of Yamazaki in this. This is mainly a mix of Hakushu, which was their second distillery that they opened in 1973, and Chita, which is their grain distillery, which is a massive industrial complex. I recently put out a video looking in a lot of detail at that, and that was online or at least built in 1972 and making its first whiskey in 1973. So those two, Hakushu and Chita, are the majority of what has gone in this. And so from Hakushu, you can tend to expect smokier, somewhere between very, very, very lightly peated, all the way up to some heavily peated whiskies that they make there. And then at Chita, they make three types of grain, light, medium, and heavy. And I think what's gone into this is a lot of light and medium. So
I don't detect any smoke on this. Do you get any smoke? That's something that I suffer from regularly. I don't get a lot of smoke. Do you get any smoke?
A very, very small amount. And that's what leads me to think that actually this isn't very young Hakushu. This is later dated Hakushu. I'd have to guess maybe somewhere between 8 and 12 years. And why I say that is because one thing I've heard from basically people who work there is that there's this sweet spot that they find with some of their heavily peated Hakushu, which is that as it ages, when it gets to that kind of 8 to 12 year, the smoke kind of drops, it drops and then picks back up again. So I do get a very, very small amount of that. But, like a lot of whiskey, that's because I know it's there or should be there. Something like that should be there. So then you look for it and you can find it.
You may be looking for it. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do then. The empty glass tonight, I'm going to put it to the side and put a wee cover on it.
Yeah.
Because what happens with me, even in the glass, even if the drams that I don't get smoke in, if there is any kind of smoky aspects there, the empty glass will sometimes give it up. But more importantly, who was it that asked in the chat? Nick Gascoigne. It was Nick that was talking about subscribing to your channel. Toki in my glass too, great in a highball. I think it would be delectable for that very thing. It's probably a good time to talk about that very thing. In Whiskey Weekend, Drum Harrow has said, so, and this is the important question, only Japanese whiskey. In Toki, you've talked about two Suntory distilleries with the Chita and Hakushu, maybe a little bit of Yamazaki. So clearly, are we speaking, is this a Japanese whiskey, Mac?
It is JSLMA compliant. That's the Japan Spirits and Liqueur Makers Association. Basically, the association of most, but not all, people who make Western style liquors, whiskey and liqueurs. And that's and those regulation, or rather, let me take a step back, those standards, because there are a lot of articles published in some of the premium press out there, and they use the word regulations, almost implying these are legal requirements. No. These are kind of suggestions, and they're suggestions for members. There's expectations that members will comply with these standards.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway,
so that would suggest then
Japanese whiskey.
That would suggest then, as my colleagues used to say in Italy, everything is just a suggestion. That there is probably going to be no consequences to a lack of compliance then. Yeah,
that's the issue at the moment. Is the JSLMA haven't thought too hard about exactly how they're going to make sure that everybody out there is 100% confident that what they're buying is Japanese whiskey. And it really could be solved. I think in my latest video about the regulations, kind of looking at it 6 months on, just put a seal on it. Her Majesty's Customs and Excise will happily stick a sticker on everything, right? I mean, just then I'm sure they'll be happy to help the JSLMA come up with some holographic seal that they can stick on the side of bottles, so that you guys just know, that this is, approved Japanese whiskey.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, because I think that there's a certain amount of untangling that they have to do now. The word is out that a lot of it is potentially not Japanese. The price is at a point where I don't know, I can't speak for domestically, of course, or but here certainly in the UK, and I am going to suggest Europe as well, and North America, we're going to care about the money that they're asking us to spend on this stuff.
Yeah.
We're not going to care so much about where it's from, but we are going to care about transparency. And we're going to care about the quality and the engagement that's in here. I'm going to hold up this bottle that I've just uncorked and poured. Juice Jones, you'll need to translate for me because there's a whole line of Japanese characters. It looks like kanji, and there's very little of it that I could recognise. But Juice Jones has bought me a wee dram. Thanks very much, Juice. And Hoyt has bought me a dram saying he's sipping on a Fuji Sanroku 50 proof. Now, so 50 proof or 50 degrees. Cheers to you. And Mac, cheers to you, straight back at you, Hoyt, as well. And Anthony Dunn has said, what makes Japanese different to Scotch? Well, let's I'll hold up this bottle and say that Mac was referencing there, yep, the Chita. And he's got a video on his channel that goes into depth on this very, very specific grain distillery. This is column still produced grain that we have in a glass here, but it is, by Scotch definitions, a single grain, right?
Yes. So this entirely comes from their Chita plant, and they have 4 ridiculously huge columns, and they run 2 of them to make the light type, 3 of them to make medium type, and then 4 of them to make heavy type. And then this is a blend of those 3, blended by Suntory's 5th generation chief blender, Shinji Fukuyo.
There is a lot of the things I was expecting to nose in this. Light, crisp apple, kind of distant, very, very light, delicate kind of sugary lemon, light citrus. But there's something else that's a bit heavier than I expected.
Yeah.
A bit more body or meat is being suggested here just on the nose. And I want to say it's, I don't know what the mash is for this. I'm assuming wheat, but there's a maltiness on the nose here that's a surprise. Biscuity, malty cereal note. Something that suggests a bit more than a light grain.
Yeah, I think they do stick a bit of rye in there as well.
Okay.
Yeah, then that's undisclosed, but they do. You know, I love it, by the way. I think it's fantastic. You know, Chita. I think it's great, and it's relatively affordable here. Very interesting that in Japan it's not really marketed as a grain whiskey. It's very much marketed to sit alongside Yamazaki and Hakushu. A lot of the marketing in Japan positions it that way, and also positions it at young people, and also positions it for highballs as well. So this is, you know, the kind of considered to be by Suntory like the entry level premium whiskey. So if you're young and you've got a bit of money, instead of making your highballs with a kakabin, the square tortoise shell bottle, which is, you know, the classic Japanese highball whiskey, you're going to be making it with this.
Okay. Wow. So anybody that's familiar with Scotch single grain, have a preconceived idea what this might behave and taste like. I have to just, I'll give it context here. This is not extremely expensive. This is affordable. It's within reach. It's a non-age statement, but it's £42, 43% ABV. But the mouthfeel on this is bizarrely coating and thick for 43% whiskey and single grain. This has suddenly gone very floral. Lots of floral notes here. Lovely texture. Much more weight than I would expect from a grain whiskey. I was expecting light. I was expecting lots of sugar. I was expecting, you know, that soft sandpaper finish that you sometimes get on a grain whiskey, the sugar, the bubble gum, maybe the confectionery notes that can often switch on the finish and leave you with a bitterness, like a saccharine bitterness. That's not here. That's a surprise. This is now competing with £40, £42 whiskey. Again, I'm not disappointed in this. That's a surprise. That's a surprise. This has been sitting on my shelf for a long time. This is a gift to me from my friend Keith. He got it for my birthday, and it wasn't a recent birthday. It's been sitting here for a long time. And that's a mistake, Mac. This is an interesting grain whiskey, I have to say. So tell me what you think of it.
I think it's great. The thing that I really love is that it's really, you took the words heaviness out of my mouth, that depth, you know, like it's got this, you know, sort of syrupiness on the nose, you know, this real brown sugar. I think a little bit inspired by brown sugar Kokuto. I should just say Kokuto already. You know, the Japanese brown sugar, which is used to make shochu, or one of the varieties of shochu, our indigenous spirit here. I think there's definitely been influence from that onto the composition of this, you know, very much for the Japanese palate. I think this works great, neat, you know, that it should be. Is all of this from a coffee still? It's from this, well, it's from a very, like one of the modern, you know, industrial continuous stills.
Okay. So not necessarily a coffee still, but a continuous still, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the texture here is the texture that we've come to associate that you would enjoy from malted barley made in a pot still. I'll try, and it's coating the glass very, very well. I don't know if I'm going to be able to focus on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just maybe just picking that up there. But the way that oiliness comes across on the palate is alluring, to be honest. This is nice.
I think one of the things that is a little bit less appreciated by people about these companies, right? Think about Suntory. You're coming into this point in Japan for Chita, right? 40 to 100 yen after tax. If we have 10% consumption tax here, for those who watch my videos, always make sure I always say after tax. And there's a ton of whiskies below that. You know, Suntory well, Beam Suntory are now the third largest distiller on earth, but Suntory in Japan, you know, dominate the drinks market here, right? They have the Pepsi license. They make mineral water. They bottle mineral water. My favorite mineral water in the world, actually, which comes from, it's a water that's used for hakshu by coincidence. You know, I'm not saying I have some incredible super taster palate, but I'm just throwing that out there. That coincidence, really? They make, you know, coffee. You've seen maybe some of the Tommy Lee Jones phenomenal Japanese adverts with him in for Boss Coffee, right? That's a Suntory company. So they make everything, and then they make this whiskey. You know, they make everything from, you know, $7 whiskey all the way up to, well, the news broke yesterday that they're releasing another 100 bottles of Yamazaki 55 for $60,000 per bottle, right? So we've got this insane full spectrum. So where, for example, if you go to a distillery in Scotland, you know, the entry level expression is just that, you know, it's their entry level expression. For Suntory, they're not thinking about it like that. You know, this is not, you know, the very bottom. This is a little bit in. And also they're very aware that it's impossible to get some of their age statements at the moment. It's only going to be maybe 2030 before supply at Suntory and Nikka is normalized. You know, I can't even remember the last time I saw a Yamazaki 18 on the shelf at RRP. So for many, many people, this is what their experience of Suntory is going to be. No age statement Chita, no age statement Yamazaki, no age statement hakshu. So these are incredibly important blends for the company. You know, you should watch some of the videos, the Japanese videos that the company puts out, you know, explaining the philosophy behind these blends. So, you know, that's why I feel that although people sometimes think, oh yeah, you know, that we think about the 12 and the 18, but these no age statement expressions are incredibly important for these guys.
Absolutely. And for us in the UK, for a long time now, and I used to be able to go to the supermarket and buy Yamazaki 10, Yamazaki 12, I could buy on offer. It was often discounted in Scotland.
Yeah.
Now I'm going back over a decade ago. But for a long time now, the only thing that we have seen is, and even then you can't be sure to get it, is the non-age statement, the Distiller's Reserve,
Yeah.
Yamazaki, Hakushu. And this one was around for a while. I haven't seen it around recently, but it is available online. So it is one of the available ones. I have to say, for a grain whiskey and for somebody that likes to explore and somebody that likes to have something a wee bit different on the shelf, this brings something different. This is an interesting thing already. At £42, I don't think I feel cheated by, no pun intended, by Chita at all. I think this is a good drinking experience. And if it is young whiskey, it doesn't taste, it doesn't sip or behave like young whiskey. Bear in mind, this is down at 43%. So it is very, very, there's no kind of barrier there from the alcohol or whatever. Spirit Bomb is in, that's Tabitha. And she's talking about, she mentioned that coffee stills are all, oops, I've missed it, Tabitha, because as soon as I started to mention, only Nikka, she's saying only Nikka, uses the coffee stills. So I guess, which distillery would that be then?
That's the Miyagi-Kyo distillery. So that's Nikka's second distillery that was built in 1969. And we're going to come on, spoiler alert, but we will be talking about that later.
Fantastic. Well, the way we're going to walk through this is we've gone for the budget blend. We've gone into the single grain. We have not stepped outside of Japanese whiskey. We are still very much assured that we're, in both of these releases, we're drinking Japanese whiskey. Let's skip two whiskies that we don't have on hand right now. You've got one that you can hold up. It's very popular in the lounge. People do love it. And that's the wee square bottle. It looks a wee bit like perfume often. And that's the Nikka from the barrel at 51.4% or something. It is bizarre ABV. Yep. So I'll try and zoom in on you there, Mac. So sure. Is it 51.4? Yeah.
It is indeed 51.4%. And really a fascinating whiskey with a fascinating history.
This, according to your first video about this GSLMA regulation that came in February, according to you, is clearly not Japanese. Tell us what makes it fascinating.
Sure. Okay, so Nikka from the Barrel, first released in 1985. Now, 1983 was the peak of the whiskey market in Japan. Back then, 380,000 kiloliters was the size of the market. Come 2007, that had shrunk to around 80 kiloliters. So I really want people to understand that. You know, and because that influences why you guys cannot buy a Yamazaki 18 right now. From 1983, for the next 25 years, the whiskey market in Japan shrunk by 80%. Can you imagine?
That's not a contraction. That's a collapse.
That's a collapse. Yeah, we were, annihilation almost, right? Don't worry, the companies were still making money because with like I've just explained, they make all drinks, right? So yeah, if you're Asahi, who own this sort of ownership as the structure has changed historically over time, but are the parent company of Nikka, then in 1987 you released a beer which you guys may have heard of called Asahi Super Dry, and that is the biggest selling beer in Japan. So don't feel sorry for these guys as a conglomerate, right? With their tentacles. I should bring out the octopus at some point. People who watch my content will know what I'm talking about there.
Yes.
But
the Suntory octopus. Yep.
From a distilling perspective, it was absolutely devastating. I've heard that, for example, in say, when I was here for the World Cup 2002, Suntory were running their distilleries 1 day a week. I mean, absolutely, insane to comprehend now, given all of this hype around Japanese whiskey. So anyway, let's go back to around 1983. So we're peaked in 1983. That was also the time that companies adopted two strategies. One of them was actually making insanely cheap, kind of very hip, very 1980s whiskey, which we won't spend a lot of time talking about. And the other one was this kind of premium development, which has become Japanese whiskey's international legacy. So in 1984, Suntory brought out a pure malt, which we now know was 12 years old, which was the Suntory Pure Malt Yamazaki. And the rest is literally history. So it was against that backdrop that these companies were trying to do a few interesting premium things. This was also during the infamous Japanese bubble era as well, right? Where, allegedly you could only hail a taxi in Roppongi at 3 a.m. by waving a 10,000 yen or a $100 note around. So anyway, there's your context. So Nikka decided that they wanted to give people this experience of what it might be like to be a blender. Sort of what might it be like to go around with your massive pipette, taking, I can see you smiling there. This is, clearly something you dream about a lot, Roy, going around and just taking a bit from this barrel, a bit from this barrel, sticking it in your glass. So that's what they went for. They went for this, 51.4%, absolutely unheard of at the time in Japanese whiskey. Suntory very obsessed with this kind of 43% level, right? So 51 was huge. They got the Sato Design Office to design this iconic bottle here, which I think is absolutely fantastic. You definitely know what it is. For those that know the story, it reminds me a bit of those Heineken brick bottles, where have you ever heard the story of that? How the CEO of Heineken just was, went on holiday, saw all of these Heineken bottles, strewn around all around the world, and thought, why don't we just make these in brick shapes, and then people in developing countries can make houses out of them, right? Unfortunately, like many good ideas, that was killed in the interest of big business. But it reminds me a lot of that. My only gripe with it sometimes is that the initial pour sometimes ends up on the table, because there is everything has been designed around us, and there is a reason why human beings persist in making bottles with long necks, right?
Yes, absolutely. If I remember well, the trick with that bottle was to pour it at an angle so that the corner was facing down, right? So that you're pouring out in that way. I do remember the issue with it. I have to say that I enjoyed my time with that, and it's a difficult one to review because it does have a lot of batch variation. It's not always super consistent. It's not the concept it's meant to be. But I've had that in my time, and I've enjoyed it. It was very bourbon forward for me. It was very bourbon cask matured. There was lots of oaky caramels and things in there. But I did enjoy my time with it. But it seems like what's in there, Mac?
Okay, sure. So there is some Yoichi, which is Nikka's first distillery, founded in 1934. There's some Miyagi-Kyo, which is Nikka's second distillery, founded in 1969. And right now, there's an undisclosed amount of Ben Nevis and potentially some other Scottish malts as well. Remember, this was first created in 1985. Nikka bought Ben Nevis in 1989. So that's the other thing. They recently brought out a blend, a Japan-only blend called Session here. And in very much kind of the English language conversation, it only talks about Yoichi, Miyagi-Kyo, and Ben Nevis. But then if you dig deep into the Japanese, interviews with the blenders, there's always some little bit that says undisclosed Scottish malts. And it's those things that make me a little bit uncomfortable, and we don't know, the percentage makeup of it. Now, what has been so interesting for me is Nikka from the barrel and we love controversy, don't we? We wouldn't have a platform if there wasn't an opinion about stuff.
Right.
I've seen this kind of reverse backlash, right? So it's so well loved the JSLMA released these standards in February 2020. We finally know what some of us always suspected, that this is not, this is not pure Japanese whiskey. But suddenly the people who love this so much are all like, why does anybody care? It doesn't matter. And, you've watched my content, Roy. You see that the way I conclude a lot of my videos. Guys, drink what you want to drink. Nobody's here to tell you what to drink. But as a consumer, a certain group of us just want transparency in what we
The
we
T
want to
word,
know.
the T word is what it's all about.
If they tell me this
Nothing is going to sow that controversy more than hiding something.
right.
Because often, especially I discover in whiskey, that the reason that things are hidden is because people are considered stupid. People are not stupid. People are uninformed. And people are only uninformed if you don't follow basic rules of transparency. Things
Exactly
are there for a reason. And it's economic. It's down to a multitude of reasons. But transparency, and you're right about your videos, you often conclude, and the T word comes up regularly in your content, Mac, when you talk about transparency. And I think that that's a subject that is not strange to us. Whatever whiskey that we enjoy.
Yeah,
MGP
absolutely.
in the States making huge amounts of bourbon under contract. We don't know. And in the UK, we're drinking whiskey and we hold it up and we enjoy it. Oh, that's a gorgeous colour. And half the bottles that we're admiring the colour, we don't know if we're admiring the colour or admiring the design of the colour that's been artificially enhanced. Oh, listen, transparency is a thing that runs through anything in life. And I think we're at the point that we don't really need to endure a lack of transparency. We have a choice. But I do take your point that if we did have the transparency, and which is potentially happening now, they come out and tell us Nikka from the barrel is going to be a blend of Japanese whiskey and Scotch, and it's still going to be fantastic.
Right.
I mean, again, it's the backstory there is more than just another bottle of whiskey. That's an interesting backstory, and it doesn't need to be Japanese.
Exactly right. Listen, I'm a big fan of global citizenship, right? Nothing would make me happier than all of these barriers to nationality and race and ethnicity and everything that we throw up for nonsensical reasons just would disappear. So for me, we're on Earth. There's a great region with some mountains and a very unique climate called Scotland. And they make a lot of stuff there. And we've got a great place currently called Japan, and we make some stuff here. And you know what? Let's take some of this good stuff from here. Let's take some of this good stuff from there. Let's give it to experts who can concoct phenomenal drinks for us, right? Brilliant. Nothing makes me happier. I love World Whiskey, a celebration of our unity. I want some music playing in the background, please, Roy. Sort that out while I go on this.
Building up to a crescendo.
I just want to know where on earth, where the hell, where on earth the components of this stuff came from. And I think that desire is shared by a lot of people, and it's clearly shared now by the industry themselves to some extent in Japan.
And I'll tell you something else that I feel is a bit disappointing too. Much in the same way you hold that glass of whiskey up to admire the colour only to discover that it's fake. Much in the same way you spend time with a glass of Nikka from the barrel to try and discover what makes Japanese whiskey Japanese, and you drink it in contrast with a Scotch or an Irish or whatever it may be, and then you discover that it's folly, and what you're actually comparing is potentially a significant component is going to be what you're contrasting it against. So it is very much a transparency issue. So we're not having Nikka from the barrel tonight, but everybody knows Nikka from the barrel is still available everywhere. It's still affordable in relative terms, but we have to know that we're not comparing it to Japanese whiskey anymore, because that's actually not what it is. But it is all malt, right? Now there's the transparency thing right there.
It's on the front, actually. It's a mix of malt and grain as well.
Okay, so it's a blend.
It is a
but
blend.
it's a world whiskey blend. That's what we've got now. So
Yeah.
again, there are lots of world whiskey blends out there. What that does is it shines a light on that and says that's what it's competing with now. Now, at 51.4% ABV as well, I think it's pointed to the enthusiast, honestly speaking. I think it's
Yeah.
enjoyable. I think it's got lots of weight and flavour about it. It's sweet to my palate, very sweet, what I remember from my time with it. But we're not going to be drinking that tonight. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to, we've had a wee blend. We've had some grain. And we're going to jump right across to, actually, we've been firmly in the Suntory camp for the first three whiskies tonight, but we will be changing that. We're switching over to Nikka. But this is another uncorking. And this was a minor epiphany for me, this whiskey. I wish I could remember the addition. I don't know if it was the 12, the 17, or the Harmony, but this is Hibiki. Now, I had tried this a few times and I had largely just kind of sipped and dismissed. There was lots to be exploring in Scotch. And for so long, Mac, I had taken my leave of Japanese whiskey because of the price and things. But I remember being poured this at a friend's house and being reminded at just how accomplished a whiskey this was. Now I'm going to frame it. I'm going to give it context tonight. We've actually got something that's not a screw top tonight as well.
Yeah, right. This stopper, this you know, buy 700 mils of Hibiki, get a free decanter.
That's what it is. This is not single use glass right here. This is a very, very decorative thing. It's a pretty thing. Absolutely, it would make a fantastic, maybe Japanese whiskey infinity bottle or a bit of a decanter, as you say. But I will frame it. We are still in the realms of, this is a blend, right?
Yeah.
What's in it? Before I tell people the price of this, so in order for you to move on from your screw top and get this big cork in that decanter, this does not come cheap these days. I paid nearly £70, and this is a blended whiskey. This has got a lot of work to do here, Mac, hasn't it?
It has indeed. And so how is it going to do that work? Well, first of all, this is a blend, again, of those three distilleries, a bit more balanced than the Toki, which, as we said before, was more forward on the Chita and Hakushu. This, it's got some Yamazaki in it, some Hakushu, and some Chita. And of course, no age statement on the bottle, but it is widely believed, as in Japanese Wikipedia widely believed, that the average age of components in Hibiki Japanese Harmony is 10 years.
That's average age. So theoretically, we could be down in the low single digits, but in order, I think it was you that made the point when we were discussing, in order to offset that, to get that average, you would have to be up in the high teens as well. That's interesting. So the first thing that we've got tonight, whether the other ones were much more a kind of a outdoor grassy cereal experience, this is suddenly popping with fruit.
Yeah.
Ripe, aromatic fruit. This is all kind of melon. It's really, it gives an essence, an aura of richness. There is a kind of distant spirit thing. It's almost nosing a wee bit, and I have to remind everyone that I've just uncorked this. There's a grappa note in the background. It's almost like, and I noticed that your bottle's been open for quite a while, right?
Yeah.
In the background, there is a spirity grappa thing.
Yeah, it's still there. That's not neck pour or any other characteristic. It's still there.
There's no smoke to my nose here, and I'm not picking up smoke on this either. But listen, I can nose peated whiskies and not pick up smoke sometimes. It's.
I'll tell you actually why that might be.
Yeah.
So Hibiki was first introduced in 1989. on the 1st of April, actually, in 1989. And that was celebrating the 90th anniversary of the company of Suntory, or Kotobukiya as it was back then, which was founded, obviously, in 1899. Now, the guys at the time, Kezo Saji, who was Suntory's chief president, and I love that, up until very recently, the guy who ran the show was also the master blender. Right. Shinjiro Tori, he was the guy, he founded the company, right? He was the guy coming up with, a bit of ersatz whiskey back in the day. We'll talk about that when we kind of do a little bit of more of a journey through the Japanese whiskey timeline in a more linear fashion. So he knew what he was doing. He was blending together, and that kind of went on for a few generations. So Kezo Saji, he wants to do something to celebrate Suntory's 90th anniversary. And so they came up with this blend of their 3 distilleries. They didn't put the number 17 on it, but it's now widely believed that was 17 years. There's a few different theories as to why that is. It might have been because they expected Hibiki to just be a one-off celebration for their 90th anniversary, didn't anticipate its popularity. The other one is that it might have technically have been something like 16.7 years, because if you do some mathematics on when Chita was founded and when they started distilling, and maybe they got the grain whiskey, they were making grain whiskey before that elsewhere. So anyway, very nerdy Japanese stuff. We'll move on from that. That's why it's in this flagship bottle, this amazing thing, 24 sides, which represent the 24 small seasons of Japan, what are known as the Seki. By the way, the Hibiki 30-year has 30 sides to it, which I think is a nice little touch as well. Good luck finding one of those.
Yeah.
We remortgage
or being able to afford it, let's say. It's not going to be like Jimmy Jazz is talking about. He managed to find his Hibiki at Harmony in a local, as a dusty, for $70. So he seems to be quite happy about that. And Anthony Dunn is asked a fairly obvious and fairly blunt question: why choose Japanese over Scotch? I'll answer that, Anthony, just by saying, you can't choose Japanese over Scotch until you try it. That's the whole point. And so I'm not suggesting that anybody runs out and buys anything of what I'm going to talk about or share tonight, but I'm going to give you my reaction as I approach these after being distant from it for a number of years. My instinct, honestly, Anthony, on this one is this is bringing a lot of rich fruit. This is a richer prospect than I expected. I don't know if it's natural color. I know as part of the regulations, even the revised ones, they can still add color and things. Do you have any intel on that, Mac? Do you know if it's colored?
This undisclosed.
Okay, so
almost undisclosed in Japan. I think the German websites would tell you that it is colored.
Okay. So we'll step back from that. This is a lovely fruity nose on this. It's much richer than the first 2 that we've tried. Still lovely texture, but it's just got that lovely soft. And I've been trying to resist using the old trope of delicate, but it is at the same time, the way it interacts on the palate, it's 43% still. So we're not getting a lot of spice and a lot of grip that the higher ABV often brings, but it's still just a lovely, delicate thing, almost without obvious faults, which to a lot of people who do enjoy Scotch, they're looking for the faults because it brings interest and it brings new flavors that they can actually come to enjoy and love. This is very, very clean and integrated and easy. This is just a very, very good whiskey, I think. Is it £70 whiskey, Mac? It's going to have its work cut out, because you can buy some lovely, delicate and well integrated and very, very clean and delicious Highland malt, for example, for £70 with a decent teenage age statement on it as well. So it has got its work cut out.
I'm in the same position. The same position. I mean, where I can find this is 5,000 yen or so in Japan, which is about 35 quid or so.
Okay.
35 sterling British pounds. And so, for that price, I can actually buy some pretty insane Scotch here. We have this asymmetry in our relationship, Roy. For you can get your great deals on your Scotch, and you have to pay a premium for Japanese. It's the reverse here. I can buy Scotch for cheaper often than you can.
Yes.
Because of asymmetry in tariffs and distribution, right? People need to understand the relative sizes of these industries as well. I think Scotch is something like 20 times bigger, in terms of export value, right? 20 times more of Scotch is being exported than Japanese. So there's obviously economies of scale. There's a completely different dynamic going on there. So even for me, at retail price, some of these Japanese whiskies are expensive relative to what I could be drinking from a Scotch perspective. I try not to, think of it like that. I think of it, in terms of, say, any other brand that, I have my, a Uniqlo t-shirt, and I have a t-shirt that I paid more money for, and they bring me happiness. And bring me happiness and joy in different ways, right? As I've looked at some of the comments, it's I don't think it's necessarily overpriced mediocrity. I think that's just not the case at all.
Well, I think that this is one that for the price that it's asking versus what it used to cost, obviously, it's got a lot of work to do to compete. But it's not something that I've opened and sipped and said it's not going to be able to compete. It's going to be interesting to enjoy that going forward. But let's just give it a wee bit of context, Mike, as I sip this and just try and process it. You've talked about the idea that 1983 was the peak, and obviously it crashed. We see a huge collapse down to 20%. In the space of 2 decades, a ridiculous closed distilleries all over the place, old stock being poured into blends and all sorts of nonsense happening over the years. They just couldn't move or sell the stuff. They're giving up real estate. They're getting rid of warehousing space, so they use up the old stock. All of this crazy stuff is happening.
Yeah.
So what happened? Was it much the same as, the enthusiasts and the single malt thing that gave the premiumization of whiskey that brought it back online? What were the effects that brought Japanese whiskey back on to the international radar again?
Sure. So we're now back at the start of this millennium. Remember what I just said, 2002, 2003, Nikka, very little distillation happening. Suntory allegedly running their plants 1 day a week. Now they'd run them 20 days a week if they could. What happened in 2001? I think Whiskey Magazine had a blind tasting event, which reminds me, for those wine enthusiasts out there, of the classic Judgment of Paris.
Yes.
They had a blind tasting of Scotch versus Japanese, and I think some other international, and the Japanese single malts. I think even some single casks were coming out on top, and in those awards, and then further subsequent awards as well. So the interesting thing about that, you say, okay, well, that was 2001, and that interest is, as we know, whiskey is a you can't just turn. It's not gin, you can't just turn on the tap and
sure.
make a Roy gin, next week and raking it in, right? We've got a time lag, and please, everybody, bear in mind some of the dates, because it's going to explain what happens 10 years later. So they turn off the tap. Then this Japanese whiskey starts winning, award after award. 2000, but of course the companies are trying to think, how the hell can we revive this whiskey market?
Yeah.
And it's 2008. Suntory begin a massive, and I mean, insanely huge promotion to promote the highball. Okay, big name actresses. I think they first used Koyuki, who was in The Last Samurai, to go out and target these salarymen and tell them, you need to switch from beer and you need to start drinking highball. And it worked. And it didn't just work, it was a spectacular success. in 2009, I think something like 38,000 cases of canned highballs were sold. The next year, 6.2 million cases of canned highballs were sold, right? I mean, this is what we're talking about. You know, so that had this incredible inflation on domestic interest in whiskey, not yet in the premium whiskey.
So this is a very Japan focused thing. This is a domestic phenomenon that we're seeing here, and this is huge. And just for context, a highball being whiskey poured over ice and topped off with soda, right?
Right, exactly right. And the reason why it was soda, see, people were drinking whiskey and water back in the 70s and maybe the 80s. That was the very like salaryman thing to do in an izakaya, but that you can't control the water quality, right? So if you're mixing it with, I mean, Japan's tap water is great, but you know, there's still going to be, as you would say, there's batch variation in the tap water.
Sure, okay.
You can't guarantee it's going to be good. While at least if you're having to pour something out of a bottle that almost certainly Suntory themselves have bottled, then there's a minimum, you know, quality that you're going to be getting in each izakaya, right? So then, you know, and remember, by the way, some of these legendary distilleries, Karuizawa, for example, is getting mothballed during this time, right?
Yep.
But international interest is kind of picking up. They're winning more and more of these awards. And so that's then causing this run on Japanese whiskey. You know, foreign enthusiasts are now starting to buy up
premium whiskey. Yep.
Japanese whiskeys. And then the thing that really transformed the domestic market for the better for these guys, but for the worse for us enthusiasts, was the 2014 morning drama called Masan. And Masan...
Now, this is interesting.
Right. That was a fictionalized account of the life of one Masataka Taketsuru, who went to Scotland to learn how to make whiskey, found himself a Scottish wife, came back, and very long story short, founded Nikka. And that, well, you see, this is now interesting.
And this
right?
drama, because I don't know if it's still available, but I watched this drama in Japanese on YouTube with English subtitles. Not all the episodes had English subtitles, by the way, but you could watch this, and it was short segment. I think it was only 10 or 15-minute chunks that you could watch, and it showed you what they would have been going through. It was like very much a love story of Rita and Masataka Taketsuru, and the challenges of facing the obvious Second World War approaching, and the challenges that they went through, and the idea of a Western white woman specifically, what she would have had to endure in Japan, what Taketsuru-san had to go through in order to, in some ways, protect his wife, how she was strong in her own way, and the way that she was able to use cunning and intelligence and her better nature in order to survive. Fantastic story, just a fantastic story. But this is a daytime soap opera, right, in Japan. Anthony does what we'd rather say. I'll refine that. What makes it unique? What in Japanese whiskey will taste, smell, I won't find in Scotch, Irish, Canadian, bourbon. The cost is so high for most. Where is the justification to try? I hope that in some way tonight, Anthony, thank you very much for your drama, friend, as always. I hope that we're going to be able to draw some conclusions. And I'm not going to suggest, as I keep saying to anybody, that they run out and buy any of these whiskies just yet. But yes, so we've got this Masan thing, this daily soap opera going out.
Right.
Suddenly, whiskey is the backstory here, right?
Absolutely right. And so there's a big run on premium Japanese whiskey because people want a taste of the Masan. Hope this was broadcast in the morning, by the way. You know, that's why it was on these tiny. It ran for 6 months from like, I think September 2014 till March 2015. But there's no more premium whiskey to buy because all the foreigners have been buying it. You see? And so that's what then sort of the top tier stuff's kind of gone. That led to this decimation of the mid tier stuff. And that led to and I've coined this phrase, so we've got some copyright on it. The Nikka Age-mageddon. You know, that's where they just ran out. And can you see that? Can you see the timings I'm talking about here? You see, prior to, let me think. I think it was 2012 that the Yamazaki no age statement and Hakushu no age statement were introduced. Prior to that, 10-year, right? 10-year was the no age statement. It was the entry level expression. So 2012, what was 10 years before that? 2002, when I told you we've gone from, you know, down to 1 day a week, right?
The tap was turned off, yes.
The tap is turned off. We now, 10 years later, guess what? We don't have any 10-year whiskey. So we've got to, you know, pull back into no age statements, right? You saw that, you've seen that actually, I think even in Scotch, right? This culling of like the earliest expression or reducing the volume of the earliest expression and then moving to a more flexible no age statement type structure.
Different drivers, but for very similar reasons, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So this has all happened, right? We've turned off the tap, international interest is growing, Masan phenomenon, plus a massive tourism boom. In 2011, we had around 5 million visitors to Japan. In 2019, before the global pandemic, we had 31.8 million visitors to Japan.
Huge.
And guess what they want to do for all the people watching out there? They want to buy their friends, you know, a bottle of Japanese whiskey, right? Travels doesn't need to be kept in the fridge. It's not like buying, you know, maybe some sake. You know, you have to think about buying that near the end of your trip, you know, maybe putting some types of sake in a fridge, etc. You just buy the whiskey and stick it in your suitcase, right? So all of these trends coming together have led to this drought that we've seen now.
And that's only just starting to make any kind of recovery now, because we had to endure some brutally young and awful bottles masquerading as Japanese whiskey for a number of years.
Right.
I under your guidance, some of the purchases I've got here tonight that I've bought, under your guidance, we know that that's not the case for these. However, they've had to use some creativity. We've tried the blend, the entry-level blend. We've tried the single grain. I've tried a delectable little blend in the Harmony there that's getting better sip by sip. It's expensive though. And I'm not paying £70 for a lovely wee decanter. I want the liquid to be good first.
Absolutely.
But we've also got something else interesting here as well. I've had this before. I've had, this is the malt version of this I have here. And I've also had the grain version in the past. I'll hold this up. Everybody probably knows what I'm speaking about already. But here we have something really quite interesting. Now we see kind of a similar style, let's say, or a similar production style from the likes of Loch Lomond, where we see, absolutely, where we see malt, barley that's processed through coffee still distillation, continuous still distillation. Yeah. And it produces a different thing from what you would expect through a pot still. But what we have in the Japanese offering here is a malt version and a grain version. And this was a profound whiskey for me a few years ago. And it was a Japanese whiskey that I would have been happy to have around. And the reason for it was super, it's going to be interesting to try it with you tonight, Mac. Yeah. It was super, super sweet. And what was amazing is that you could pour this for somebody that you had failed to get interest in any of the scotches that you were pouring or the bourbons or whatever it may be. You picked up that maybe they had a very sweet tooth. And this was very effective. The last bottle I had of this behaved a lot like rum. It was so sweet. Let's see if it's still the same now. What do we have here? Are we both having the malt? Yes, because there's a malt version and a grain version.
Absolutely, there is. So Nikka Coffey Malt, nice picture of the coffee still on the back here. Nikka have a couple of coffee stills actually. They brought over in 1963 and 1966 and installed them initially in their Nishinomiya factory. They were only shifted to Miyagi-Kyo, where they are now, in 1999. Taketsuru learned all about coffee stills when he was at James Calder. up in Bowness.
Bowness.
So yeah, absolutely. So he was at Longbourn, he was at James Calder, and he was at Hazelburn. And so he always at the back of his mind was, oh yeah, this coffee still, pretty good stuff, for some grain whiskey. And then as we had this whiskey boom in Japan, post the Second World War, in the 1950s and the 60s, and then the 70s. So Suntory dealt with it by building Chita in 1972. Taketsuru was like, we've got to differentiate. We've got huge competition. We've got new entrants to the market. How can I make my better product than Suntory? And he's decided that one of the ways is to increase the depth of his blends, and he's going to do that with better grain. So he's brought these coffee stills over, and so it was a key component of their blends. And then in 2012, they released the coffee grain, interestingly, only for Europe.
Wow.
Then it was released a few months later in Japan. And then this came out in 2014. Again, January 2014 in Europe, and then July 2014 in Japan.
This is a completely different beat altogether. This is very sweet. This is a dessert whiskey, absolutely a dessert whiskey. It's still sweet in my, as it was in my memory. This is banana and maple syrup here. This is very brown sugar driven. This is it's difficult to, if you start to think about, am I getting any fruit or anything else in here, it's difficult to see past that big dollop of dessertiness here. So the fruit that you are going to find is going to be super ripe, super sweet things.
Yeah, absolutely
like
right.
Sweet mandarin and overripe orange.
I've got
almost
a video.
like almost like orange cordial, even, a syrupiness.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'll just say I've got a video coming out about this and coffee grain in a few weeks' time, and I don't want to give away any spoilers for fear of reducing the viewership. But I describe it as potentially even not just you can have it with dessert, but even potentially just a replacement for dessert. It's really got that feel to it, right?
Oh, it's on the palate. It's just a big blast of maple syrup, very, very syrupy. Oh my goodness, it's so sweet. It's white chocolate, almost like a strawberry white chocolate, like a fondant thing happening now. A bright kind of, it's all desserts. The fruit here is the type of fruit that you would have, it's like alcohol soaked ripe sweet fruits. It's liqueur territory. Is, I know why this reminded me of rum. It's very reminiscent of, if you enjoy rum, or if you're a whiskey drinker who likes to step into the rum category from time to time, I think that you might enjoy this. If you're a whiskey drinker with a sweet tooth, there is no doubt this is right up your street. We've got a bump in ABV, so where everything we've had tonight has been very light on spice. There's not been a lot of spice. There's not been a lot of things to really awaken our palate or give us much grip. But now we're starting to get a wee tiny bit of spice on the finish, but it's like a soft, dark ginger note, and maybe sugary, gingery sweet, like a ginger biscuit.
Yeah, these are 45% ABV, which is Nikka's preferred. If you look at the single malt, Yoichi single malt, Miyagi-Kyo, the coffees, they prefer this 45% compared to Suntory's 43%. And I, of course, Nikka would tell you in their corporate history that this is to give people a richer experience. But I think it's just because, the origins of Nikka and Suntory really go back to a huge falling out that the junior Taketsuru had when he was working under his senior Tori at Yamazaki, and very, very different philosophies about exactly
this is the old Jedi Master Padawan. This is the Sith dynamic going on here, right? That the apprentice will eventually overtake the leader. That's exactly what happened in this scenario, right?
Yeah, Taketsuru, when he got on the boat to well, he took the long way around. So he went to the US, went to the West Coast, crossed, and then took a boat from New York to Scotland. Incredible journey, especially, of course, back, 100 years ago. But he, who was seeing him off on the boat? Well, his family and a few friends. And then basically a guy who was going to help fund him from what is now the Asahi Group, a guy called Tamesaburo Yamamoto, and a certain Shinjiro Tori, the guy who founded Suntory. Yes. He waved him off on the boat. Then when Tori is like, okay, I want to stop making this ersatz whiskey, it's time to get this, he had a strong belief that it was time for the Japanese to start drinking, authentic whiskey. He goes to a friend of his, actually, a foreign friend of his, Dr. Moore, is like, oh, I've heard of this guy who went up to Scotland to, investigate, as a certain article may have you believe, as an industrial spy. And Tori's like, oh, yeah, I know him, oh, he's back, is he? Oh, great. Okay, let's have a chat. And so he brings him in as basically distillery manager for Yamazaki. Incredible, right?
And defines an entire category. Births it from. And what year would that have been?
So they built the Yamazaki distillery in 1923, which is the date that you see on your bottles, like this one here at the top. And it started production on, I love this, right? 11 minutes past the 11th hour on the 11th of November, 1924, is when the button was pushed at the Yamazaki distillery. And they bring out their first whiskey in 1929, which is called Shirofura, which means white label, which is why there's still now like a cheaper Suntory bottle with a very, Suntory white. And this will make you laugh, right? Big fanfare. It sold for 5 yen. At the time, you could buy Johnny Walker Black. Oh, sorry, it was sold for 3.5 yen. And at the time, you could buy Johnny Walker Black for 5 yen. And the Japanese consumers complain that it has this, this new Shirofura has this smoky, burnt taste that they're not fans of, and that
was Taketsuru's.
Well, that was Taketsuru working in the Yamazaki distillery with Tori, and Tori maybe made them in conflict and making different decisions. They actually had conflict as to where to position the distillery in the first place, because if you look at Taketsuru's notebooks that he wrote in when he was in Scotland, he always thought, oh yeah, Hokkaido, the northern island of Japan, that's, he was already thinking that's going to be the best place to set up a Scotch distillery with a climate similar to Scotland. Tori, the businessman, wanted to be kind of on the Tokyo, Osaka railroad. And so Yamazaki, for those of you who visited, as you know, is kind of halfway-ish between Osaka and Kyoto, and kind of a much more easier location for distribution.
Absolutely. And so what's happened there is that they've had their disagreements over what is Scotch, what's going to be acceptable out there in the market, etc., etc. And the relationship, in terms of a professional relationship, only lasts for about 8 or so years, right?
Right, exactly. And then Taketsuru quits in 1934. And there's varying reports about exactly when he kind of jacked it in, but he's already got his mind, a few months after he kind of formally completely cuts ties, he's already having meetings with investors, right, to, fund, and again, this is where things get confusing. The project was initially one to make apple juice, but, that then evolved into being Nikka whiskey. So they built Yoichi in 1934, and the name Nikka is a corruption of Dai Nippon Kaju. So the Ni of Nippon and the Ka of Kaju. That word means the Great Japan Juice Company. So a corruption of that comes to Nikka, and in 1940 they bring out Nikka whiskey.
Fantastic. And at that time, the only other whiskey that would have been produced in that way would have been Suntory under Tory himself, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely right.
I noticed that what Greg's Whiskey Gary's saying, this is definitely dessert whiskey, Roy. As for me, Baines. Okay, so Baines, he's probably talking about the Baines grain whiskey. I get that entirely, Greg. Graham Fraser is saying, I wonder if any distilleries use coffee stills rather than standard continuous stills. Well, I think specifically that's what we've got going on here with the image. I'll try and bring this up for you, so that you can see this, Graham. Have a wee look at that. You've actually got an image there, and underneath it says the coffee still. Coffee being a different spelling. It's not double E at the end, it's EY after Aeneas Coffey, the Irish famous Irish exciseman who, after being rejected in Ireland, brought the coffee still, which was an improvement on it was Stein's original design for a continuous still. He improved it and brought it to Scotland and sold it to Scotch distilleries, which is fascinating in itself. And somebody mentioned that, is there corn? As the chat was scrolling past there, I wonder who that was. Probably a lot of corn in the mash bill to make this so sweet. I get Graham Fraser, it was probably a lot of corn in the mash bill. That may be true on the Nikka from the Nikka grain.
Exactly. So Nikka from the grain is 100% US imported. No, sorry, not 100%. I think something like 95% US imported maize or grain, plus a small amount of malted two-row barley, and this is 100% malted barley. So that's the thing. So as part of in the 1970s, Nikka started running malt through their coffee stills, and they thought, this is great. They started sticking it in their blends, and then we started getting, in 2003, we started getting some single cask coffee grain and coffee malt releases. To answer Graham's question, great to see you on the tape there. Great question. To my knowledge, there's about 10, I think, coffee, like real, genuine Aeneas Coffey style coffee stills. And I tap my heart to represent that guy. Needs to be completely celebrated. We need to raise our glass to him. Absolute genius, French-born Irishman, died in obscurity in 1852, despite his insane legacy that he's left for whiskey.
And we're not just talking about Irish and Scotch whiskey, we're talking about global whiskey production. Anything that wasn't made in a pot still right is directly at his hands. Absolutely. It's a good reason to raise a wee glass. And Dribs and Drams over in Canada said, I have the Nikka coffee grain and the Yoichi single malt. I think a coffee malt doesn't meet the requirements for Japanese whiskey. Am I right? Perfect segue, Dribs and Drams. Well done, my friend. Take it away. Why? Firstly, the grain, coffee grain whiskey, Nikka coffee grain, does meet the requirements and the malt doesn't. How can that be?
Okay, so very good question from Dribs and Drams, and a lovely segue, because this is what was really interesting. If Nikka were one of the very first to react to these JSLMA guidelines, and they were basically the guys, them and Suntory, the guys who masterminded the release of this stuff. So they immediately put out, like, which of our premium whiskies comply with these new standards and which don't. And coffee grain does. And interestingly, they have two different explanations on their websites. And this is something that you have to deal with here. We've got the Japanese website, and then we've got the English website. The Japanese website just says that there's some Ben Nevis in here, basically.
Okay.
The English website talks about this very specific statement about, as part of our experiments in the past, we've used some Ben Nevis distillate, and there you go. So we can't call this Japanese whiskey. And that's really interesting to me. There are a lot of possibilities of what we read into that statement. I think I've concluded that it's maybe in the marrying vat, and then they can't guarantee that they have scrubbed every single molecule that is not from, Japan.
Well, if you consider if you're feeding the still with wash, they're not importing wash from Scotland. They are importing malt spirit from Scotland.
Right.
So at some point of the mature process, they have used a vatting where Ben Nevis would have been introduced to this for some reason. Now, there's a lot of folk in the lounge tonight that's going to understand exactly what Ben Nevis is.
Yeah.
If I talk about Japanese whiskey being very clean and very accessible and very almost linear in its delivery of flavors and things, Ben Nevis is exactly the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Ben Nevis, sip by sip, will bring a complete one sip will be sweet and fruity, the next one will be sour and dry, and that's kind of what Ben Nevis is. It's quite an old school whiskey. It's going to be quite full on and bold and very difficult, maybe for somebody who's early in their whiskey journey to get their head around. So if there is Ben Nevis in this, its influence is very light, or the Ben Nevis that I recognise.
Yeah,
this is a very different whiskey. There is nothing in Scotch that I remember and that I can equate this to. It's just a very sweet, rich dessert whiskey.
Yeah,
it's very unique. There's nothing. This will go alongside hundreds of other bottles here, and it won't compare to any of them. It is very, very unique. That's how I remember this whiskey. It's nice that it's still like that. I remember that my wife enjoyed this. My wife is a sweet tooth. I know that I've got a lot of friends with a sweet tooth that would be quite happy for me to pour this again. For me, this whiskey would over-exaggerate a drier whiskey. I think it would, if you sipped it in contrast with something dry, it would bring the dryness right out.
Spot on.
And it means, for me, this would probably be a single dram pour. It's very unlikely that I'll go back and pour another one, because it is so rich and so sweet that it is like that digestive liqueur you would have after a meal. That's how I would categorize that whiskey. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I can do two, or maybe.
You could go back for a second. You've got a sweeter tooth than me.
I almost certainly do have a very sweet tooth.
Well, the sensation on my palate right now, since the last sip a minute or two ago, is chocolate.
Yeah.
It's almost like a chocolatey.
I know, and very specifically milk and white chocolate, right? Not bitter chocolate, which you do often get in whiskies when we talk about
sherry
chocolate.
casks. Will bring bitter chocolates. No, this is sweet chocolate. This is creamy sweet chocolate, white chocolate.
Exactly.
Absolutely, quite fascinating. Let's step it up now, because we've got one more to pour. In terms of there was another one, and it's an interesting one in itself. This is an old one. It's kind of an aside. This has been in my collection for a long time now. This is from a friend of mine. Gary bought this for me, and he did actually. Either he brought it back from Japan, or he got a friend to bring it back from Japan for me. This is the Taketsuru pure malt. Now, I've tried Taketsuru pure malts in the past with age statement. This is an on-age statement one. And it's one of those, it's a very, very sweet whiskey. Again, this is quite a sweet, easy, clean whiskey to enjoy. But again, something for a sweet tooth. This is no longer available, right? But you can still buy Taketsuru malt.
Yeah, so I think it was 2000 that they launched the kind of the Taketsuru brand, named, of course, after the founder. They had used, for the real nerds out there, they had used the name before in some of their bottlings back in the day, but this was like the big launch. And the range expanded ultimately to have a 12, a 17, 21, 25. There was even a 35, a couple of ultra limited editions. But in March 2020, they killed the age statement line. It was like the last of the age statement ranges to survive. And they killed that black label bottle that you have in your hand, and they replaced it with a new, younger, no age statement bottle, which has kind kind of a label,
a creamy coloured label, yes.
The creamy coloured label in line with the more this kind of label here. This is a Yoichi, but I don't actually have a new Taketsuru in my personal collection. I drink it at bars. They limited production of it. I love to limit production. We've got something like 246,000 bottles a year, which, and it's impossible. And whenever you find it, we don't have the kind of control on RRP that I would like to see here. So even if you find it in a lot of, liquor stores, sometimes very rare to find it, then you're already going to see it for maybe 50% more, 60% more.
Prices are jacked up.
Yeah, more than RRP. So that should be like a $40 whiskey in Japan.
Jemmy Legg is spot on. And to give our discussion context tonight, when we're speaking about this clean, easy, smooth whiskies, Jimmy says, how many people that are decades into drinking whiskey prefer sweet whiskey? And I think specifically Jimmy's talking about that journey where we start to we dig out these interesting, more bold, more challenging flavors and come to really love them. And the more complex and the more the flavors switch and change on us, the more fickle that the whiskey is in the glass, the more it engages us. Yeah. None of the whiskies I've had tonight behave like that, Jimmy, and you're absolutely spot on. Everything that we're having tonight is clean and delicate and I don't want to say homogenized, but I do want to say integrated. I do want to say that they're very together. There's no layered flavors. That it's quite everything is rounded and easy.
Yeah.
And I think that Jimmy makes a good point there, that if you were going to go out and put a Japanese whiskey, I think the last whiskey tonight potentially could challenge that idea. I don't know, but certainly the ones that we've been trying tonight are very light, linear and clean. Graham Fraser is saying, are there any other Japanese blends containing Scotch whiskey aside from Ben Nevis that we know about?
Yeah, I'd like to. I think some phenomenal points being raised in the chat as well. It's almost become a cliche, right? The word that's used often when describing Japanese whiskey is the blends, right? The blend, even the Japanese, it's about the art of blending. That's the global reputation. They've almost, until recently, by the way, we are really in a phenomenal, fascinating cusp of Japanese whiskey, which we're going to talk about soon, Roy, kind of the present and the future. But certainly the history that we've come from, imagine being Shinji Rotori. You've released your first whiskey, smoky and burnt is the feedback you got. You're going to go, he starts thinking, okay, maybe I don't want to make Scotch. I want to make whiskey for the Japanese palate. And that, again, you get wrapped up in a lot of interesting concepts when you start to think about that. But
I was aware before we went live tonight, Mike, that I didn't want to roll out all these old tropes about, and I used the word delicate, but when I was in Japan, the diet was so similar, the flavors were so subtle.
Yeah.
You think of the rice dishes and the fish dishes, the seafood that I had, so much of the food was very, very subtly flavored. And I realized back then that probably there's a side to the Japanese palate that is probably a lot more sophisticated in certain aspects than a Western palate.
Yeah.
Would you agree or not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've lived here for 15 years and, it's insane. Like you go to the top, well, not even the top really, any, like the scale of, you can eat really well here for very cheap, and a lot cheaper than you guys can buy Japanese whiskey for. I can eat like a king. And I see Greg from Greg's Whiskey Guide in the chat, fantastic channel, and great to see him here. He's absolutely right, very, very subtle flavors, and that is what has driven Japanese whiskey, right? So when they're making Hibiki for the first time in 1989, that's the expertise. They want to make a flagship whiskey which sums up 90 years, right, of the company's history. So they're gonna be sort of harking back to the fact that, you know, sherry casks were were the first casks used, you know, Suntory's history in winemaking, this original, you know, like rejection of smoky burnt flavors, the precision of blending that they have developed, that they're starting very, very early back then, but getting international recognition for. Now, I want to say things are changing. Here's an interesting, you've got to look sometimes here in Japan for those little subtle, we talked about subtle flavors. You've got to look for the subtle indicators of the shift. And we had a Hakushu limited edition this year. Prior to this year, they have always written heavily peated on those bottles. They wrote peated this time. You see what I'm trying to drive at here, Roy?
Yeah.
It's not heavily anymore. You know, they've understood that there's been a shift. People are drinking much more Scotch here. They're drinking much more Lafroig, right? They're, you know, Suntory own like
Bowmore and Lafroig.
Exactly, right? So they own them. You know, they're bringing that stuff in. Nothing makes them happier than you know, profit margins may well be higher on them bringing that stuff in than actually selling their own Japanese whiskey. So, you know, that's a recognition that palates are changing, and you're going to see, I think, a shift in what is being made, and not just by the big boys, which we're focused on tonight because that's what you guys can get, but we're having this wave of new distillery openings here. And I've reviewed some of their offerings. News broke a couple of days ago that Distill Ventures, which is Diageo's kind of venture capital arm, they own a stake in Storning in Denmark. Those guys doing great work out there. They're now...
this is like the Diageo Skunk Works, right?
Yeah. They've gone out and they're finding this new stuff that they can get their little tentacles into. And they just bought a stake in Kanosuke down in Kagoshima. Now, I reviewed their first single malt. Man, I'm going to bring you a sample when I get over to the UK, and I'm going to do it in a blind tasting format. You're not going to be able to tell me that stuff is 3 years. You know, it's a phenomenal dram. Chikshibu have been doing great work since 2008. Just look at, you know, the prices of their stuff in the secondary market and how insane that's been. So things are shifting in terms of what is demanded by the consumer here, you know, at a more premium level. And that's going to be really interesting to see how that affects some of these flagship products.
I don't want to give away how I'm going to summarize tonight, but I've just sipped a little sip out of the last whiskey that we've opened, and I'll show people what I've opened again. It's already been up, but this is quite remarkable. This is a non-age statement. Nikka single malt from Yoichi,
right. Yeah,
Hokkaido, right? 45% ABV, exactly as Mac described. That's slightly higher ABV. So everything that we've talked about tonight, the theme is still intact. This is a very integrated whiskey.
Yeah.
But for the first time tonight, the whiskey has shouted louder than Mac. Not because it is challenging or bold. This is the first peated whiskey. It is obviously peated, but it is not heavily peated. It's just peated. But it is so fruity and easy and together, and it's not layered. Everything is inside everything else. It is, again, remarkable because this is Scotch-alike. It's supposed to be the closest potentially to Scotch, or what we can identify as a very familiar profile in Scotch, and it's different. This is remarkably different. Now, would this hold Jimmy Legg's attention? No, I think it would get his attention, and Jimmy Legg would not be able to call this a bad whiskey. Absolutely not. Would it hold his attention dram after dram? Maybe not. But this is a very, very, very accomplished whiskey.
Again, that concept that, you know, right now, this dram represents all of Nikka's history. This is the first distillery they set up, right? in 1934. There's nothing with the Yoichi name coming out at the moment. So whether you like it or not is personal choice. I think we sometimes really do forget that. It's always worth reiterating, right? When you watch a video or anything, it's just one guy giving his opinion, often of the taste of the whiskey. That's one reason why I also like to deliver a lot of information in my videos, because that's the stuff that's facts, and then there's the tasting. You can argue about the price and where you can get it here and there. In Japan, this is basically a $40 whiskey, about
Wow.
whatever that is, £30 in 30 pounds. And this is a flagship whiskey for Nikka right now.
Well, I'll tell you, I paid a lot of money for this. This was £65.
Yeah.
Now, you consider the other things that I can buy for £65, like I say, like the Harmony, it's £70. It's got a lot to compete with here.
Right. Yeah.
But this is I am desperate to throw a couple of these in some blind lineups. I think their elegance, their balance, the sheer way that they're integrated, the sheer way that they don't have any hard or jagged edges, maybe would make them stand out. But I think everybody would have to admit that they're still at the upper end of their price point. I mean, they're still asking for you to reach deeply into your pockets, honestly speaking. With the exception of the Toki, maybe. They are up there. But I don't feel cheated by any of these. And I am surprised about that, Mac. I am surprised, because I expected to be able to stand up here tonight and say, they're still making great whiskey in Japan, even at a younger age statement, still a bit expensive over here. Maybe there's one or two in the lineup tonight that you might be interested in. I need some time with the Harmony, because I think that at £70 it's a lot, but it's fabulous. Picking it up and nosing it on the back of the smoky one. It's just that aromatic fruit. Some baked goods coming in now, like a bakery type note. I mean, I want to go back and sip some more. Again, all of these are just, I don't want to say flawless, but I want to say difficult to find flaw in them. That's different from flawless, right?
Yeah.
It's difficult to find imperfections. These are very, very, very well put together. It's quite a fascinating and even a wee bit humbling to go through these and do this tonight. It's I'm quite taken with all of them, if I'm honest. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying that's unbelievable. Every time I touch it, it jumps. Have you ever done a live stream, Mac? Do you know what that's like?
It can be hard work. I know. Respect for you.
Go ahead, read it. Greg is saying £10,000. £10,000 question now, Aguavite. Have you tried any Yoichi? And that's what I've got now. What are your thoughts about it? For me, the real deal, if I may say. Greg, that's interesting that you're joining it in as well. So previously I had a small bottle of the non-age statement Yoichi. I bought it at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. Wee tiny, maybe a 35cl bottle it was. I think it made it into a recycled review. And I loved my time with it, especially as the bottle went down. I remember enjoying it back then. I think this is better.
Yeah.
That's quite fascinating. Graham Fraser is saying, how recently did the tastes of Japanese drinkers adapt to peated whiskey? And Jimmy Legg is saying, it's not whether I like it or not. Is it forgettable or isn't it? Jimmy, whatever you lay at these whiskies that I'm trying tonight, and I mean every single one of them, forgettable is not an adjective to use. That's quite profound that you would ask that, and it's quite a profound statement to make. But Graham Fraser's question is good about the peated palates in Japan.
It's a great question, because when I was filming some of the videos you're going to start coming up, I was speaking to David Tsujimoto, who's the barman of Aloha Whiskey, where I filmed some of my videos, and I was talking about how I drink so many different types of whiskey now, and so many different drams. It's what's important for me is the stuff that really stands out. Like, okay, this was good. We say that, right? I was in a bar relatively recently, and I sort of turned to everybody and said, okay, go on, there's a free dram on me for anybody who points to these whiskies, any of these, and tells me that they wouldn't just go, oh, this is good. You know, we often say that, right? Oh, this is good, this is good. And people have different scoring, and, but we all seem to concentrate in this 80 to, 90, 75, maybe to 90 range. It's whether, you go, boom, wow, okay, I remember that, I want another bottle of that, specifically. And yes. So it's a good way to frame the conversation. I also, because I've seen Tweedley's been very active on the chat, and love to see that. Great questions coming up as well. Asking what is the future? And what is it about age statements? So they're now too in love with blending. We want to definitely address that, but Roy, whenever you want to move on to that, we can talk about.
No, I think it's a good way to kind of. I'm going to, before we go into what is the future, Mac, I'm going to say something. I've been surprised tonight, and I've been quite honestly seduced by these whiskies. I'm grateful to have all of these, and that's significant because they were not inexpensive to buy. But I went out after a discussion with you about what, and some of these I have tried before, and I thought, okay, I know that that's probably light on risk, but I have been seduced by all of them. I'm not going to go back and hit the Nikka Coffey Malt. It's a bit too sweet for my personal palate, but I will have it from time to time, and I will vicariously enjoy that through giving it to other people who don't normally connect with whiskey, who have a sweeter tooth. That will be a powerful weapon as it used to be. The rest of them, including that Toki, and I imagine that I'm going to become seduced by that Harmony as well. The Chita, remarkably good on mouthfeel and weight and body for a grain whiskey. And the Yoichi at the end. Jimmy Legg, I'm sending you some of this Yoichi. Graham Young is coming over here from Canada. He'll be able to meal some over to you. I'm going to get some of this Yoichi to you, because whether you like it or not, Jimmy, I don't think you would call it forgettable. However, anybody that's interested in a deeper, more, let's say a deep dive into any of these whiskies, pick up Mac on Kanpai Planet, because not only does he go into a deep dive in all of these whiskies, he is critical. He's not a fanboy. He loves and he's passionate about the topic and the niche, but he's very critical. He's very tongue-in-cheek. He uses humor to point out a lot of aspects that are at play in Japanese whiskey dynamics, and it's very, very interesting to watch. So don't think that you're going to turn up and be consuming the product of a fanboy like you often get from me. Mac is very critical as well, and very, very balanced. So I hope you all enjoy the fact that so many of you have clicked that subscribe button for Mac tonight, and enjoy not just the production value and what he's sharing with you, but that insight and that shared knowledge that we enjoy so much in this community. Mac, what does the future hold? You mentioned 2030. That's 9 years away before they even get a chance to catch up again. Is Alistair Greybride's maybe dram? Mac producing some amazing videos on WhiskyTube, possibly the best editing there is. I need that Glenfarclas Resident Evil Japanese exclusive whiskey. Alistair, thank you very much for your kind words for Mac and your dram, my friend. Cheers, Alistair. Thanks to you.
Thank you very much, Alistair. I didn't actually answer your question about how Kanpai Planet came about. So there's the future of Kanpai Planet, and then there's the future of Japanese whiskey. Not sure what the audience is.
Take it away, share.
But and I'll talk about Kanpai Planet in a bit, because then that addresses some of what you said, and then I'll segue into the future of Japanese whiskey. So I was working for the man here for 10 years, and then anybody who works, you either work for the man or you don't work for the man, and I didn't want to work for the man anymore. So I started a tour business here called Maction Planet. There's that planet theme again, in 2017. And I'm very honored to say that went very well. People wrote some lovely things online, some amazing word of mouth. And I was guiding for 300 days in 2019, which will definitely give you fasciitis, even if you don't have it beforehand. We were all expecting an amazing 2020 with cherry blossom season and then the Olympics, what was going to be the two most visited times in human history for people coming to Japan. Unfortunately, a certain virus got in the way of that.
Yes.
As part of Maction Planet, I've created content. on a lot of platforms. I have a pretty active blog and also YouTube. And I started a series in early 2020 called Tokyo Taste Test. And my first 2 videos were on 2 of Japan exclusive flavors of Coca-Cola that you could get at the time. And I wanted to grow this. And I decided that it needed to be on a new platform. And that's where Kanpai Planet was born. The reason I make content about Japan is simply because I live here. I've been here for 15 years. If I lived in Kiev, I would be making content about Ukrainian drinks. It's very simple for me. And the reason why I live here is that for me, in the 108 countries I've visited, Tokyo is just the best city in the world for what I need from life, which is safety, efficiency, great people who will return your wallet, the food, and if you lose it, and the food and the culture. And by culture, I mean things to do. It's the biggest city on earth. So there's just a lot of art galleries and bars and restaurants and sport and music and all the things I love. So that's why I want to share some of the passion I have for the place I live and some of the knowledge, and point out both the brilliant things and also the quirks. And I'm really, really honored and humbled that it's been so well received by the community. It's really been incredible. So thanks to you, Roy. Thanks to everybody in the chat, and thanks to all the subscribers and the viewers. It's just been amazing. So that motivates me to keep, spending days editing these.
Yes. Well, much like the whiskey tonight, Mac, the content that you're putting out is without flaw. You're much more punchy than I am. You're much more succinct. You've got a very clear, defined point to each of the videos. You're very considerate of the audience when you're putting together your production. And I encourage people just to go over. Even if you don't have a passion or an interest in Japanese drinks and whiskey right now, spend a little time with Mac and you might just be seduced, as I have been with these whiskey tonight. And Tweedley saying 100% great guest, and I'll be looking at his channel after this if he stays awake.
It's still there. It's still there. It will still be there tomorrow. You can pass out and then you can watch it later.
David, thanks for the kind words and thanks for the dram buddy. I hope you do go and spend a wee bit of time with Mac. So tell us about the future of Japanese whiskey. We've understood, we've walked through it. We understand that there are mines to navigate. We have to understand that for a while, 2024 is the 1st of April or 31st of March 2024 before they all have to comply with this.
Yeah.
But we've identified a couple of international export products that we're familiar with that are not fully Japanese whiskey. And they should not be judged as being bad whiskey, but maybe they could do with having a bit more transparency and enjoyed under the knowledge that they are perhaps a world blend or more alike. But we've also touched on some very clean examples of Japanese whiskey, which is legitimately Japanese whiskey, says so on the label, and it's available in global markets. Are we going to enjoy more of this? Do you see a position where there's going to be an appetite for age statements to ever return? What do you think? And Scotch, just to give you some context, most of the Scotch capacity in the space of 12 years has virtually doubled in malt whiskey production. Are we seeing that we must be seeing similar numbers, if not more, in Japan?
Fantastic. Just before I say this, a lot of comments on always price that I just want to address. This is the 3rd largest economy on the planet, sometimes the 2nd, depending on how other stock markets are doing. And price is a very simple function of supply and demand. So, hopefully, right now, the supply is minimal and the demand is absolutely insane. I almost sense some resentment from that, in the chat, in comments that I get in comments. I just see these people who are, they want to try it, right? They're excited by it. They're excited by Japanese culture. They want to sample it and they're being priced out of the market. And I feel their pain. I feel like that here, right? You should see what I would have to pay here for Hibiki 12, Hibiki 17. I recently reviewed a Yamazaki limited edition and a Hibiki limited edition that came out this year, the Blossom Harmony and the Yamazaki LE 2021. Yes. Those are $80 bottles at RRP. But I could go and buy one right now in a shop called Don Quixote, and they would want to charge me. I think
Don Quixote.
I know that's a whole. We can spend a long time talking about pretty much we can pick at everything I say here. Fascinating stuff, right? And the mascot is a penguin, and we abbreviate it to donkey here, which of course is just hilarious for all English speakers. The Hibiki Blossom Harmony is 6 times RRP, and the Yamazaki LE is 10 times RRP, right? That's just. Yeah, I saw a bottle of Yamazaki LE go in auction for almost £1,200. That's just it's just a function of supply and demand. Somebody is buying that stuff, and
somebody is willing to pay. Somebody is willing to pay.
You're seeing that same situation with Ardbeg committee releases, right? You're seeing.
Maybe not quite to that scale, but absolutely, we're seeing it right across the sector. We're seeing it in bourbon. We're seeing it in Scotch. We're seeing it in people are. We talk about it often on the vPub. Absolutely, that dynamic. But what's interesting, what you're talking about, is it's not just an export thing for Japanese whiskey. It's very much a domestic dynamic as well.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's all I want to say about price. It upsets me that I have to say at the end of every single video, RRP. I think this is a must own. Come here on holiday, buy in a supermarket, fantastic. But but there is other stuff out there, because I'm not a fanboy, and I don't have the lack of self-awareness that makes me look at this isolation. Every bottle of Yoichi is competing with every single bottle produced in Islay. So we talked a bit depressingly about that shrink in the domestic market, right? And we talked a bit depressingly about all of these contractions. But again, the reason I brought out pricing here is because the important key point is supply and demand. So where there is a lack of supply, there will always be human beings to fill that demand. And that is what started rather presciently in 2008 with the Chichibu distillery. In 2011, Mars brought their old distillery in Komagatake back online. And then from 2015 onwards, we've had this new wave of Japanese craft distilleries, right? We're having new whiskey licenses. Every month, the government is granting new whiskey licenses to new producers, to sake and shochu breweries who are thinking about making whiskey. So very, very exciting times. And now that the foreign interest is, I like to think Diageo watched my Kanoska video and saw me raving about it and decided they need a piece of that, because I look forward to my commission. I'm happy. I can rebrand that video as paid promotion after I get that check from them. But
afterwards,
after that. But it's really exciting times. So that's definitely happening. Those whiskies are still pricey, as they are priced like some Isle of Raasay kind of stuff is, right? As some of the newer craft distilleries in Scotland, it's not a comparable price point to,
that's right. And there's an element of, we'll pay a little bit more because we know that you're starting out, and you're trying to do something different. You're trying to bring something. We understand the scales, the economies of scales and everything, and we are willing to pay a bit more. But there are some that are way beyond a fair price. Even in Scotland and in Ireland and in England, the US, everywhere. It's everywhere. The interest in whiskey isn't isolated to any specific country right now. This is a global phenomenon. Everybody's interested in the pursuit of flavor, premium. We're looking for quality. We're in the age of the internet as well. So not only can we discover it, but we can also discover what's good, which is this kind of spiral that everybody's chasing the same things. And yes, absolutely.
There's so much going on, right? I mean, you can really drive it down to some real macroeconomic trends about general living standards on Earth. The big generalization, I know, general economic trends in terms of investment and assets and all. There's a huge amount going on. To me, now our beloved brown spirits are becoming pricier around the planet. But that's happening. So we've got that craft distillery trend here, and some of the new guys, Shizuoka, Kanosuke, putting out some, just excellent juice, really fantastic. concurrent with that, we will 2030 is when you should expect, and it's going to be a continuous process across that time. You're going to see a normalization. I picked up my first bottle of Hackshaw 12, which was famously, discontinued. And discontinued means something very different. I don't really get what discontinued means, because Hibiki
temporarily unavailable. Yes.
Yeah, you still see it on some of Suntory's website, the Hibiki 17. For me, discontinued means we're annihilating that from history, but not for these guys, so it's the first.
Well, that's interesting. You were able to buy a Hakushu with a 12-year age statement recently, right?
Yeah, I know. It was
How much did you have to pay for it, Mike? Be honest with us.
I got very lucky, and I managed to find it. There are some honourable retailers out there who will not inflate prices, which makes me very happy. So I was able to pay the correct retail price of around 85 or so US dollars.
Okay.
And
okay. Still pricey for a 12-year-old. That's about, in the order of 65, 70 pounds of that order. But still, I understand that that's a wee sign, a wee flicker, a wee candle at the end of the tunnel that maybe that it's coming back into it. But that's what we do. We work together as a community, Mike. We work together to discover, in whatever climate that we live. We're drinkers. We're not collectors. We're not completists. We're not trying to fill our shelves with everything from everywhere.
Yeah.
But we are trying to have that shared experience. We are trying to enjoy those whiskies together. And when we do discover something that is affordable, it does have good value, it does have quality about it, that's when we get together as a community and celebrate it. And yes, sometimes that does drive demand for it, but that deserves to be done, so that in its wake, other people can step in with the same formula and bring good quality, so that we can share more and more. And I hope that that's what happens in the future for Japanese whiskey. What are you about to pour there?
I've got to give this a shout out. I'm going to be dropping a review about it next week. This is Kirin. Kirin are the third largest whiskey maker in Japan, and I saw somebody drinking a Fuji Sanroku 50. I'm not sure if that was the white label or the signature blend. If it was the white label, then a big shout out to that. That was discontinued. It was a $13 whiskey here before it was discontinued. I did. That's the only whiskey I've gone out and I'm like, okay, they've given me 5 months lead time. I'm making every bottle I see. $13.
You're hoarding it.
You cannot go wrong. I want this. I want to be drinking this. This is my go-to highball whiskey. I sip it sometimes remarkably complex for a whiskey that cheap. So Kirin have really ramped up their grain production. And this is the first whiskey they are ever exporting to the US. I think they began on the 20th of August. They started on the West Coast, moving eastwards. Their aim this year is to get it in 12 states, about 900 liquor shops and venues. It's going to be about $95 US there. Now, I know the US is a very different market for imported whiskey as well. So that's kind of a different price consideration. So it's definitely priced at the premium end. I really don't want to spoil my video, but you're going to find out everything that you ever wanted to know about this bottle. Great presentation. Just hopefully you can all see that little Mount Fuji at the bottom of the bottle there. More important, can you see that? Sorry.
I don't see Mount Fuji on it. Let's
here where my finger
is. I do. Wow, that's in the glass. That's fantastic.
It is. So that's what it looks like from the bottom view. And then
that is fantastic. Superb. I see it now. That's amazing. That's amazing. So that's a teaser for an upcoming video.
For an upcoming video. More importantly, that's a teaser for it's already available in France if you can hunt it down. I think, spoiler, I think this is worth investigating. Really, really, really beautiful.
So your hot tip is we did not see that, and Mac didn't tell me about that in advance, so I didn't even bother looking for it. So there's a wee tip from Mac, and much like Mac's prediction for whiskey, how it's going to kind of continue to look bright for the future for Japanese whiskey. I hope so, because it's been in the doldrums, certainly in this house, for the last decade. Mac, you've invigorated my interest in a category I've been ignoring for a long time, not just because of this evening, because of the content that you've been putting out on the channel as well. I hope that the content on the channel is very much the same prognosis as the whiskey for Japanese whiskey going ahead, and it's going to continue to come out and be the quality that you've been sharing with us up till now. Congratulations on meeting 1,000 subscribers, my friend. Thank you very much for hanging out with me tonight. Are you able to stay for the quiz?
Nothing would make me happier. It's been such an honor and so much fun to be here. Thank you so much, Roy, for everything you do for the whiskey community, and great chat as well, which I've been keeping an eye on as well. Some phenomenal questions. Sorry we couldn't get around to all of them. Maybe a hint that we should do this again sometime, Roy.
Absolutely. What we need to do though, Mac, is a blind Japanese versus Scotch.
Okay.
That could be an interesting one. Jimmy Legge saying, can you ask if the Japanese are using corn or wheat primarily in their grain whiskey? Corn or wheat, or is it a mix?
A mix. Depends where you go and what whiskies they are. And they're also shoving a bit of rye some time in as well. So, for example, with that Kirin grain, it depends. They use a doubler, they use a kettle, they use a continuous still, and the mix is slightly different for each one.
And Graham Fraser is asking, Graham, is Karazawa really worth the current prices?
Well, I mean, no, because it's a
Graham. If you, I know the type of whiskies that Graham has. It's much like the whiskies that you have on hand right now. You wouldn't pay the prices to get those whiskies, Graham, today. You got them at a time that it was. If you've got the money, potentially, if you're a completist or a collector or whatever. I have not tried any Karazawa. Have you tried any? Yes,
I have tried. I've been honored to try quite a few of the amazing stuff as well. For those who, it makes me so happy, by the way, slight segue into what I'm doing on Kanpai Planet. When people pick up on like the odd word or the odd little look here and there, if you notice, I always refer to it as the now legendary Karazawa distillery. If it was that legendary, it'd still be around today. That's the simple fact. Now, unfortunately, the domestic market just was not interested in what these guys are producing. And things went to
we
this.
see so many similarities with the Broras of this world, put in a warehouse and ignored for years, never treated as a single malt until way into the 1980s, the late 80s. It was Port Ellen was considered too bold, there was not a lot of people going to be interested in drinking Port Ellen as a single malt. This is the thinking back in the 70s, and it's never going to, and these become, as you say, the now legendary distilleries because they've had that benefit of hindsight and contrast and looking back on things. Kozak Whiskey Blog is asking, does Japan pay attention to the color of whiskey? Is the color of alcohol perceived in Japan? Obviously, they're using added caramel color.
Yeah, for some of them, again, it's rarely disclosed. Which I think this was a comment that Roy, you picked up on earlier on. I think when I speak to my other Japanese friends who talk about whiskey a lot, we come to the conclusion that there's, from the big two guys. And you see this a lot in commerce, and I think you see it a lot around the world as well. It's like, from Coca-Cola, you'll drink what we serve you. So not the disclosure. Even I recently reviewed 2 premium Essence of Suntory releases. Just no disclosure of. I recently inquired as to whether there was color in a bottle from one of the big guys, and they told me it was confidential. It's not going to be confidential if you've not added the color.
Sorry. We're living in 2021 and you're adding something to something and not telling people that you're adding it. That's not going to be confidential for long.
I don't know.
Get ahead of the curve. Graham Fraser is saying, thanks, Mac. Lots to explore after tonight. Erwin, good to see you. And Erwin, he's saying, is Fuji malt or grain? I think Mac already touched on that. It's an upcoming video, but there is various grains in there. Dribs and Dram is saying, Lyle, thanks for another great live. I just subbed to Kanpai Planet. Good for you, Dribs and Drams. Thank you so much. And Hoyt is saying, tell Mac it was Kieran, 50 degrees white label.
Yes. Brilliant.
And Connor Smith is saying, have to go, but thanks, Roy and Mike, for another great vPub. Connor, thanks for joining in tonight. Sorry you won't be able to join for the quiz at the end, buddy. Hope you catch it up on the replay. And Andrew Butler is saying, I still don't like Brora or Port Ellen or Karazawa as much as others. And Andrew Butler has been, and he knows his way around whiskey because he's been drinking it for a very, longer than most of us. I don't want to say a long time, Andrew. Callum is saying, yeah, Japan likes dark whiskies. So for us, Rassi, that's Callum who was, I think you're still at Rassi, aren't you, Callum? For us at Rassi, we age in a sherry barrel for Japan. Obviously, still natural colour, but they're using the cask to darken that liquid. Wow, that is because they're buying with their eyes. That's just surely an educational thing. And Andrew Butler is saying, it's like I prefer Little Mill, a more delicate malt, rather than Rosebank. My Karuzawa equivalent is Hanyu. Oh, so there you go.
Yeah, well, Hanyu, of course, that was the father of Ichiro Akuto, who then founded Chichibu. So also got these like family histories and legacies, even in the craft distillery. So Hanyu, if you guys can get yourself on some, get your hands on some Hanyu juice, it's fantastic, but ain't going to be cheap for you.
When you do make it back to the UK, Mac, you'll need to be packing a wee selection box for Aquavitae, just so I can at least touch some of these things, and I'll be happy to trade it with some of the nicer things I have here. Strap yourself in, buddy. We're going to run into this quiz at the end before we keep these folk awake for far too long.
Yeah.
Thanks for everybody to staying to this point. I have tried to be very fair with the quiz at the end tonight. Maybe a couple of tricky ones, but generally speaking, I've tried to draw it back a wee bit. We did get to a point that we were being very, very brutal with most folk, and I forgot what it was like to celebrate a 10 out of 10. So we might see a 10 out of 10 tonight. Let's see. There is a couple of Japanese ones just sprinkled in there, but the quiz is just a very, very typical quiz at the end, multiple choice. Please stay along with us and have some fun. Mac, are you ready for some quiz time? Yes?
Let's do it. Good luck, everybody.
All you have to do is get a pass mark, buddy. 5 out of 10. Let's go. Let's go. Good luck, everyone. 10 questions, as we say, multiple choice. It's only, you only need to share your score if you want to. It's fully optional. Thank you all. Gregor Dykeman is in saying thanks to you and Mac. Thanks, Gregor. Thanks so much. And Molasses is saying, I've missed my Japanese Whiskey Guide 2021. And Hoyt is sending Mac a dram for the info on Kieran 50 degrees. It was a gift. Thank you very, very much, Hoyt. Thank you for your dram, my friend. Nice to see you. And as always, cheers. Question 1. I think I'm starting with a hard one here. This is a tricky one. Which of these Diageo series came along first?
Oh, yeah.
3 series that we might recognize from Diageo. A, Flora and Fauna. B, the Hidden Malts. And C, the Extended Classic Malts. So all I'm asking is which of these came first? John Della Cuisine is saying quiz time, yay. Thanks, Sean, and I know where you are, buddy. I know that you're an hour ahead, and I really do appreciate you staying up to the wee hours of Friday morning. Just give a wee bit of consideration to Mac. What time is it over there, Mac, now?
It's now 8:20 in the morning, which is almost a reasonable time for some breakfast whiskey, of course.
Well, here's today drinking, buddy. I cannot tell you how appreciative I am that you gave up your early Friday morning for us here and joined us for a wee dram too.
No problem at all. In fact, I've run out. I'm going to pour myself another one while we get to question 2.
Tell me what you think. Would you be guessing this one, Mac?
Me, I would. Do you want to know what I think it is?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I think it is the Flora and Fauna.
Well done, you. Absolutely. Flora and Fauna came out as early as 1992. The Hidden Malt series came along a wee bit later to highlight things like Colilla, Glenelgan, Clynelish, for example. And then eventually that idea, the Hidden Malts, was ditched in favour of the Extended Classic Malts. So 1992 for Flora and Fauna. Most of the lounge bagged that straight away, so it wasn't as hard as I thought it might be. Question 2, which distillery did Nikka purchase in 1989? And as if I'm sure that most of you did know this anyway, but Mac clearly spelled it out a wee bit earlier tonight. Marty Wong is saying, not a very Japanese question. No, Marty, only a few. The questions tonight will be Japanese, buddy. I'm not going to throw 10 Japanese quiz. Not least because I don't really have the knowledge to prepare the questions.
I was hoping for, on the Chita bottle, what do you call this upward stroke of the shodo calligraphy on the tat at the bottom?
Well, if I was preparing a quiz
he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it, mate.
If I was preparing a quiz just for Mac, then probably it might have been in there. So we're looking for the Nikka purchased Scotch distillery. Is it A, Tomatin in the Highlands, B, Bamore on Islay, or C, Ben Nevis in the Western Highlands? Graham Young is saying he's got 2 out of 2 already. He's got this in the bag. You obviously know this, Mac, because you mentioned it earlier. Go ahead and tell us. Who did they buy in 1989?
The fantastic Ben Nevis distillery.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree. Perhaps often not a beginner's whiskey, but one of the most characterful that we have. Question 3, which of these distilleries was Billy Walker pivotal in helping to revive during the 1990s? Billy Walker was involved in the revival of this distillery way back in the 1990s. Dragging whiskies out the doldrums, a bit of a theme tonight maybe? A, Deanston, B, Glendronach, or C, Glenglassaugh? Please note the banana skin. Tim Hoekstra is in. Tim, he's saying, oh no, another banana. I'm hoping that Frank can swing by and grab your t-shirt, Tim, and take it over to you. That would be amazing if that could happen. Tabitha is saying, now, Spirit Bomb Tabitha, do you know Tabitha?
Yes,
Spirit
I do. Absolutely fantastic engagement. You should all follow Spirit Bomb on Twitter.
Yes, she's a huge fan of Japan and Japanese whiskey as well. I'm very glad to see her in tonight as well.
Great logo as well. Absolutely love that. I might be,
Yeah.
I might be borrowing or stealing that someday.
The aesthetic. I think most people I'm really surprised most people have dodged the banana on this one. What do you think, Mac?
Yeah, I think it's A. But I think the banana is potentially B, right?
You're right. He was involved in the revival of Deanston way back in the 1990s. But of course, he's had a huge hand in Glendronach since 2008 and Glenglassaugh since 2013. I say since, but obviously that's much more. He's obviously moved on to Glenallachie now, but both those dates are much more recent in the 1990s. So Deanston, absolutely true. Not a lot of people know that he was involved back with Deanston back in the day. I had a wonderful session with Ian McMillan, so insightful a few vPubs ago, talking about a lot of the changes that happened in the 90s and into the 2000s at Deanston and the other Burn Stewart distilleries. Fascinating stuff. Give yourself a point. Go into question 4 and ask, which of these distilleries is not located in the whisky town of Rothes in Speyside? So I'm going to give you a list of distilleries and I'm asking which one is not in Rothes. A, Glenrothes. B, Glen Grant. C, Knockdhu. First Phil Whiskey is in. Good to see you, Phil. Another fantastic high quality Whiskey Tube channel in as well. So much of it just now. We're really spoilt for choice. I don't get any time to watch TV anymore. Superb. Superb. Would you be guessing this one, Mac?
I think it's C.
Based on
gut. But based on some sense that there's some knowledge dredged from the back of the mind, and combined with some what I like to think is educated guess, but we all know is just winging it.
Well done, because Knockdhu is not actually a Speyside distillery. They don't refer to themselves as a Speyside. I think they could if they wanted to, based on their location, but they do. They are a Highland distillery. So it's Knockdhu, and I'll place actually the village that they're in is called Knock, very close to Huntly. Glenrothes and Glen Grant are both very much in the busy wee whisky town of Rothes. So the answer was definitely C. The Lounge got this for the most part. Russell Whiskey's celebrating his 4 out of 4. Well done, Russell. Fantastic stuff. Now we have a picture here. You have to hold your water, Mac. You have to not say what this is. It looks very, very seductive. What a scene. What just a gorgeous view that is. The mist on the mountains there, the deep, deep, lush green. What distillery are we looking at here? Are we looking at Hakushu? Are we looking at Yoichi? Or are we looking at Yamazaki? Now look at those pagodas. Look at that. It's almost like an air bridge, right? That connects the two pagodas. Is that kind of anything to do with ventilation? Do you have any intelligence on that? Is it just an aesthetic?
It's primarily driven by an aesthetic design originally, you know, because, well, let's talk after the answer, maybe. I don't want to give too much away.
Okay. But you clearly know what that is, Mac. Very, very distinctive kiln ventilators there. And again, most of the chat know that it is. We are looking at Hakushu.
The beloved Hakushu Distillery, one of my absolute favorites distilleries on earth. Founded in 1973, surrounded by this beautiful forest with unbelievable water. Like my favorite water on earth comes from this place. It's just incredible. Great. When you guys come here, you've got to visit. Don't count on buying anything in the shop, but you still have to visit it.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. What a picture it is as well. Question 6. When did labeling whiskey as whiskey become defined by law in Japan? Now, I feel like I picked this up from benching Mac's content on his channel, but in order to put the name whiskey on a bottle and for it actually to be whiskey, when was that actually defined in Japan? Was it A, 1924? Was it B, 1968? Or was it C, 2020? So if you were to pick up a bottle and it said whiskey on the label, in order for it to be whiskey, when was that actually defined?
I'm looking at the chat because I see Jimmy Legg's gone one better and just written never. I was going to say that if anybody says 2020, the cynicism is strong with this one. You know?
And Jimmy Jass is saying never, never. Actually, it was defined in law. When was it, Mac?
It was 1968. So basically, up until, which is late enough, guys, you know, until that point, you could call it whiskey. And you know, I know it's late there and some of you have been drinking, so you can all guess what the rest of that sentence might be. You could put anything in the bottle, but it didn't even have to be 100% whiskey. That just meant some of it had to be what we would understand as whiskey.
Quite incredible, quite incredible. Question 7. What has just been launched that's cheaper than its 2020 release of the same? So we've just had a new release that's just been announced very, very recently. If you're active in the Facebook group, Aquavitae Barflies Facebook group, you might have picked up on this. But what's interesting is the 2020 edition has come out, and it's actually come out a bit cheaper than the 2021. So the 2021 edition has come out, and it's a bit cheaper than the 2020 edition. Is it A, the 2021 Kilkerran, heavily peated? B, the 2021 Glenturret, 12-year-old? Or C, the 2021 Glendronach, 15-year-old? One of these has been released in 2021, and it's odd in that it comes to the market a little bit cheaper than its 2020 release. You'd be guessing here, Mac, I'm going to guess.
A.
You think a Campbelltown heavily peated Kilkerran has come out a wee bit cheaper? That makes sense. The Lounge, the Barflies in the Lounge know this. Last year it was £65 for a 12-year-old Glenturret, and this year it's come out £60. I don't know what it's going to be on the general online retail. I've not seen it there, but apparently at the Glenturret online shop you can get it for 60 quid. Here's a lovely picture from Barfly Alistair Gray. On the left, he's got the 2020 maiden release. On the right, he's got the new 2021 release. And in the back, he's made a wee lamp from his old bottle. I want to know how he got the cord through that, how he drilled the glass. Sugar Kitty's on 7 out of 7, as is Andrew Butler. Lots of 6s out of 7. Very high scoring. Lindsay Holman is happy with his pass so far. And Graham Fraser is on 7 out of 7. I think, are you on a full house so far, Mac?
Me, I just got that one wrong. So 6 out of 7.
Ah, wow. First one to get wrong. Question 8, maybe a wee bit of a banana skin. What has been married to fill the world's largest bottle of whiskey? This is something that happened today, the 9th of September. at 311 litres and 1.8 metres tall. So now, supplanting a long-held record by a bottle of Famous Grouse, we now have a new largest bottle of whiskey. It's obviously just a big stunt. But I want to know what's been married to fill this 311 litre, 1.8 metre tall bottle. What was it? A, 7 Islay whiskies, B, 8 Indiana bourbons, or C, 2 32-year-old casks of Macallan. What did they use in order to fill a 311 litre, 1.8 metre tall bottle of whiskey? Jean de la Cuisine is saying, I thought the 2020 was amazing and kept the bottle for my infinity bottle. I absolutely think that 2020 maiden release of Glenturret 12-year-old is exceptional, and it won't be often repeated. I'll be surprised if the 2020 is as good as that 2021 is as good as the 2020 release. But I really, really hope that it is. That would be amazing. Are you guessing here, Mac? Did you hear any of this chatter today?
You said it happened today, and my today, from your perspective, has been spent predominantly asleep, so that I was awake for this.
You've got no chance. Yes, of course.
I did. I woke up and I'm like, I've got to shower before jumping on, in case somebody has smell-o-vision. Let me have a think. I mean, that's a lot of premium Macallan to be sticking in something. But you know, if you were going to do a stunt like that, I don't know. I'm just going to go with B.
You think they put?
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to go with A.
Okay. 7 Islay whiskies, you think? I can tell you that they married 2 32-year-old casks of Macallan.
My word.
Yes, my word. I can show you an image here. This is the bottle, and it's obviously commemorating intrepid explorers the world over. Ranulph Fiennes and many other explorers. There were some bottles made, a very, very limited edition series of bottles as well that will be sold for exorbitant prices, no doubt. You can see the label down the bottom, distilled at Macallan delivery. That's 1.8 meters tall. Look at this image here, the largest cork ever seen. As somebody trying to put the cork in the bottle at the top. Don't knock over that bottle, whatever you do.
That's a good fill level. I'm impressed.
Yes, a good fill level as well. But just quite a fascinating story that they would choose 32-year-old Macallan. I wonder what the value of the whiskey in that is, and the insurances and everything involved. Anyway, I thought it was an interesting story. I don't know what the big deal about having the biggest bottle of whiskey is about, but there you go. Question 9. Which of these conforms to the new February 2021 GSLMA guidance for Japanese whiskey? Which of these conforms to that guidance? Is it A, Nikka Coffey Grain, B, Nikka from the Barrel, or C, Nikka Coffey Malt? We've discussed it at length tonight. There is a banana skin there, but I really don't think after the discussion and the presentation that we've enjoyed from Mac tonight, we should all be bagging this and taking it to the bank. We know this one. Only one of those three conforms to the new GSLMA. Japanese Spirits and Liquor Makers Association, is that right?
Absolutely right. Liqueur, actually, I think, in there.
Liqueur.
It's interesting that that's their English name. Their Japanese name would translate more to like the Japanese Western Liquors Association, but this is their English language acronym.
Got you. Go ahead, tell us, Mac, which one is it?
The answer is, of course, A, the Nikka Coffey Grain.
As we've established tonight, the coffee malt may have a lick of Ben Nevis still hanging about in there, maybe from some remnant from the past. And Nikka from the Barrel most certainly likely does at least have Ben Nevis and potentially some others too. So let's see. How are you doing, Mac? I think you're holding strong. You're on 8 for 9, right?
I've got 7 out of 9. I was flummoxed by being weak and sleeping and not attached to my Twitter during the endeavour of the Macallan.
The 32-year-old Cass Macallan. Graham Fraser on 8. Graham Young on 8. 8 for Evan as well. Evan Calitz is on 8. Graham Young, 8. Superb. Hoyt on 8. Lots of 7s tonight. Paul M on a 6. Good. That looks like a new name, Paul. You're welcome. Sugar Kitty on 8. I'm looking to see if there's any other 9s to join Andrew Butler's 9 out of 9. Andrew is a scholar at this thing. I think he finds the quiz at the end. Well, maybe he doesn't find it easy, but he always seems to do very, very well. Jean de la Cuisine is saying, let's go for the asshat. Yes. Unfortunately, there is an asshat question to close out. Does it mean that Mac, your friend Mac, is going to end up just taking 7, or is he going to manage to push it up to an 80% score tonight? It is a bit of an asshat. Chichibu number 2 was brought online in 2019 and was 4 times larger than the original, making it... Now, you're excited, but it's an asshat question, Mac. A, about the same size as Edredar. B, about the same size as Ben Nevis. Or C, about the same size as Ilsa Bay. Chichibu, remind me the gentleman's name.
Ichiro Akuto-san.
Ichiro, yes, famous for Ichiro's malt. I would pronounce it Akuto. It's Akuto, you say?
Typically, syllables are roughly the same length in Japanese. So in English, we have this tendency to put the stress on the penultimate syllable,
Right.
Osaka, when you see like
Osaka.
Akuto, but it's sort of a little bit more staccato in Japanese.
Got you. Akuto. Well, he opened his new distillery only a 2-minute drive, I think, from his original one. But he made it almost like a carbon copy, but just scaling everything up, making it 4 times the size. So he's now able to make 5 times as much as he once did. Yeah. But what does that mean? It's about the same size as Edredar, about the same size as Ben Nevis, or about the same size as Ilsa Bay? What would you guess, Mac?
I mean, I might have to ask out the asshat and ask if you're talking about Edredar 1 and 2 together, or
no. I'm not speaking about Edredar 2, but very nice, very good. So you're up on your Scotch distilleries too.
I actually love them. A couple of the glasses I've been the tour glasses that I lovingly use. If you guys go up and dig, I tasted the Vanilla Float limited edition Japan exclusive Coca-Cola in this, just to make sure I got maximum nosing. Okay. This is a tough one. So I would just have to guess, to be honest. I don't know. Maybe go with. I'm going to go with A, but hang on, wait, let me think. Okay, I'm going to go with A just to put us out of our misery.
Boom. Well done. Well done. Absolutely. The same size as Edredar. We consider that Edredar is one of the smallest distilleries in Scotland. It is very, very small. But Edredar is making about 250,000 litres now. And, Chichibu was originally around 50 to 60,000 LPA. The new plant, 240,000, 250,000. So when we talk about scaling up like that, they're still very, very small scale, and putting them about the same size as Edredar.
I think
so there you go.
It's a phenomenal question to end on, because it really gives some of the scale, about what we're talking about in Japan. People talk about, Japanese whiskey, right? The entire output of this industry, I think, is comparable to like 2 of the Diageo, or 2 of the larger Glens, right? I think you take 2 of the big, the monstrous Glens, right? And then you that's all we're making here. So, we've just scaled up Chichibu, who are in the top 5, right, in Japan. And we've just made it 4 times larger, and it's the same size as Scotland's Little Gem, as I think they like to be called, right? So,
and I think that's forgive me for the asshat. I'm sorry if I tripped up anyone at the end there, but that is exactly the idea of these kind of questions, these crunchy questions. At least it makes you think, or it causes pause for thought. That's the intention anyway. Sugar Kitty gets a great score of 9 out of 10. Absolutely fantastic. 8 out of 10 for Jimmy Legg as well. Jimmy's killing it tonight. 8 out of 10 is brilliant. Erwin, 4. He didn't make a pass tonight, Erwin, unfortunately. Jimmy Jass is saying 5 for 8 on a pass. Robert G, that looks like a new name, Robert, on 7. Chuck Malt Minion on a 7 as well. Andrew Butler is saying hooray. Andrew, well done again, buddy. You got your 10 out of 10. Absolutely superb scoring as well. What a scholar he is. Evan, our new name, Evan, tonight as well on an excellent score of 9 out of 10. Fantastic. Listen, it's amazing to see so many names still here for the quiz at the end who joined us at the start of tonight as we knock on for 3 hours about a subject that is off-piste for the vPub. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this, the support. I hope it's because you were captivated by Mac's input tonight as much as I was. Mac, I've absolutely loved having you on. It's been a pleasure. I'm very grateful that you would step forward to help enrich the vPub with a theme that we don't know so much about in these parts. But I have been, I'll use the same word again, seduced and found these whiskies alluring this evening. I've still got lots left in 4 of these glasses. The only one I've actually finished this evening is the Toki that I started with. And let's see if I'm getting any smoke now that I've had this glass covered all night. Just maybe purely because I'm looking for it. But really, if there is any in there, it's so delicate to be easy to miss, let's say. But I'm going to enjoy these as I do some housekeeping tonight as well. But before I do that, I'm going to raise a wee glass, and I'll ask everybody to join me in thanking my friend. Let's catch some of these. Another fine vPub this evening. And arigato gozaimasu, Chita, she's saying to Mac. So she's saying, hey, thank you very much, I guess. And Andrew Butler is saying, I know some people who know Ichiro Akuto. Fantastic. Yeah. And Gregor is saying 5 out of 10 pass mark. I don't know why I got the first question wrong. Well, my first guess was A. John Della Cuisine is saying, lovely stream once more. Mac has been a great guest. Thank you so much. Eric W. I wonder which, that's not Eric Way. Is it only just a pass mark, but always so informative? That's not Eric Way. I'd suggest it was somebody else. But Eric, that looks like a new name. Thank you very much for your drama, friend. Nice to have you in here. Molasses is saying, thanks so much for growing our knowledge, Mac. Graham Fraser is saying, there's another fascinating stream, Roy. Every night's a school night, even for an old hand like you, Graham. Fantastic. Mac, my friend, I wish you all the very best. Keep bringing it, buddy. Don't go AWOL on us. Keep bringing this content, this insight, this we look behind the curtain of a category that we don't always get the access to, that you can afford us, and keep making yourself a regular around these parts too. It's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
What a Kanpai, yeah, what an honor to be here. Roy, you've obviously done phenomenal work over the last few years for this incredible whiskey community, which I just feel honored to be a part of. Loving all of the engagement from people, everybody who stayed with us for 3 hours. Thank you so much. Arigato gozaimashita, indeed. It's just been fabulous. I'll keep making them as long as people keep watching them. You know, people often say, oh, you know, those YouTubers, they're always asking for the sub and the share and whatever. It's because it takes a long time. Every video I make takes me about a minimum of 2 days, sometimes 3. I can write, you know, I know because I write for a few outlets here, and I guest on some podcasts. I can do a lot of other content in that time. Video is something very special. It's a reason why, you know, people want to turn books and comic books into movies. You know, I now understand why the credits at the end of a film are 20 minutes long in small print. So
absolutely.
If you guys keep watching, people like me and Roy are going to keep making them. So thank you all so much for your support. Thank you.
Let's raise a glass together and wish our friend Mac over in Tokyo a very heartfelt Kanpai.
Kanpai.
Stay backstage, won't you, Mac? Stay backstage, my friend. Thank you so much. Absolutely wonderful. What a treat. I very much enjoyed the chats with Mac building up to this. I wanted to, we could have gone on for much longer. I feel like we've only really scratched the surface of the whiskies and the stories behind them as well. But there's scope for us to explore it more if you found it interesting in the future. Thanks to everybody that's joined me tonight again. I'm going to try and keep this under 3 hours. I think I might just manage to squeeze it in. Let's raise a wee glass of this the one that did it for me tonight is this one, the Yoichi at the end. My goodness, it's a good peated whiskey. The closest I can consider is maybe something similar to a very well put together Ardmore. Anyway, I'm going to send a sample out to Jimmy Legg and we'll see what he thinks of it. I'll raise this glass and thank you all for your time tonight, you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. You're all very, very dearly loved, and I'm very much looking forward to hanging out with you next week with an on-location vPub as we study location versus whiskey, coming to you live from Ardnamurchan Distillery up there in the Scottish Highlands. And until then, I'll raise this glass and say Slàinte mhath, and of course, Kanpai. Good night, whiskey folk.